Baby, when I get that feeling that I need a little bit help to be dreaming of my D&D game and what I do at a con. Everybody's laughing at me. I don't understand what's happening. Why is everybody's laughing? That was a rhythm and blues song, everyone. Hi, I'm Tom Lommel. I'm your host. And sometime Dungeon Master, never your master of ceremonies or songs. I'm here. Welcome to Disorganized Play. This is our DM show where we give DM advice. Usually every Wednesday, I run a Dungeons & Dragons game, and on Tuesdays I sit down and think about the issues that are coming up, reflect on the issues that were brought up last session, and then I share them with you and share some DM philosophy, some tips, tricks, and advice along the way. This week is Gen Con, as you all may very well know if you are on Twitter or anywhere else. And that means that we are not having a game tomorrow night because everybody's traveling, with the exception of myself. So we have the opportunity to sit down and do a very special round table, as we infrequently do. I always enjoy these sessions, and I know chat does too. And I am very happy to welcome Jay Africa here to today's stream. Jay is an Adventurers League veteran, player, DM, writer, author. You're going to see one of his events debuting at Gen Con, right?
That's right.
Later this week.
Yeah, yep.
It feels
very excited.
Weird to say that. And neither of us will be there.
Yeah.
Do you have any good spoilers or tips that you can give to somebody who's going to play in the event? Like, oh, I watched Disorganized Play, so now I'm one up on.
Oh boy,
it's okay if you don't feel comfortable.
No, it's hard
cheating.
to say. It's hard to say. It's part of the new Moonshae Isles series that's being produced by Ballman Games, and so I'm just really excited to be writing for that particular setting, and. That's all brand new, right? Yeah, exactly.
Like literally came out last week or something like that?
No, I think the first Moonshae Isles adventures premiered in Origins earlier this year.
I thought I just recently saw the like player's guide or whatever it was, the kind of the regional like Bible for it.
Yeah, exactly. Right? The campaign guide just recently came out.
Right.
So
awesome. Well, what's the title of your event in case people want to come and play the J Africa experience?
If you would like to play my adventure, it is called Gate to the Unknown. So actually, you know what? Here's what I can say about it. Because of the settings, the Moonshae Isle settings, it sort of harkens back to a lot of older D&D style play, and so I tried to give portions of it. There are portions of it that are very much like an adventure for today, but like the last portion is this dungeon crawl that I tried to give like a very classic feel to. So the rooms are sort of callbacks to some rooms that I enjoyed playing in older dungeons.
Gotcha.
So,
all right. Yeah. And the ecology of the dungeon doesn't make any sense. And there's a minotaur living next to a maiden chained to the wall, but they never interact.
Yeah, exactly. They're just random pools in one room that you can like dip your equipment in and stuff happens.
I don't know if you remember, but I back long ages past, I kickstarted an adventure called The World's Worst Dungeon Crawl. And that was one of the things that I had to very specifically make the point that these rooms, even though they're right next to each other, they never touch each other.
Exactly. You never worry about where the monsters go to the bathroom or like where they store their stuff or go to sleep or anything.
The beautiful thing was we promised a print edition of it, right? Like largely the idea was to fund the filming of it, and that was like the main the main deliverable, and that was like a 2-hour, 3-hour game that was super fun. But when it came to like, you're also going to get the module. That was one of the other rewards. Well, a 2 to 3 hour module was like 8 pages. Right? It was like barely anything. And we had promised a 32-page module, so I got to write this whole separate module that completely made no sense. That was really just designed to be as confusing to a DM as possible.
Oh wow, okay.
Where like north wasn't pointed towards north on the map, like the map was oriented differently.
Oh, that's awesome.
And then there was stuff in the room descriptions where some of the rooms were miskeyed, like all of some of those classic like gotchas that you came across when you were reading those old school dungeons.
Yeah, sure.
Just because because it's the world's worst dungeon crawl. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah. Hey, we do have some topics to discuss today. Speaking of making sense, we're going to try and help you make sense of the con experience, specifically playing in a convention event or an Adventures League convention event, running an Adventures League convention event, just some tips and tricks from kind of our experience. I am a longtime veteran of Gen Con, have played and helped organize the NASCRAG tournament over the years, as well as running my own events at Gen Con and at various other cons, and you've also had an immeasurable con experience.
Yeah.
I believe, when was it? Was it like 2 years ago I played at your table at Strategicon, something like that?
Yeah, that was the third season of the, no, excuse me, the second season of the Adventures League. So that was like back in, 2015.
We can't not have the birthday girl come make an appearance on camera.
I don't know anything about.
You just need to say hi to everyone so they can all wish you a happy birthday. That's all. Ladies and gentlemen, our friends beyond the binary, let's wish a very happy birthday to Madam. I don't know. I don't know what the best way to
Madam? I'm 28 now. I guess I'm
Madam, wow. Amanda Mahoney, everyone.
This is just my torso.
You gotta come back here.
Let me squat down. And peanut M&Ms, anybody?
We all got you some. We all pitched in and got you some peanut M&Ms for your birthday. Yeah.
I've got this backpack on and it's ruining lives.
I'll see your head is cut off in the.
There we go.
Oh, there we go.
There we go.
Yes.
Hi guys.
Yes.
Should we sing a happy birthday, an R&B happy birthday?
Oh.
R&B happy
birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Mahoney. Happy birthday to you.
I'm not gonna touch that note.
That was the most beautiful version of happy birthday I've ever heard. Thank you both very much.
Is there one thing at Gen Con you're looking forward to?
Hanging out with good friends.
All right,
it's gonna be super fun.
Good friends, come find and take a selfie with Havani.
Take a selfie.
Selfie with Havani.
Havani, my most popular nickname.
Havani Mahoney.
I'm Havana, by the way.
Hey, good to meet you. Jay.
Jay, nice to meet you. I'll get out of your way.
Thank you for stopping by.
I dropped this giant D20. What did I roll? I rolled a 19.
Nice.
One away from a crit.
Very good.
That's very good.
If you double it, you get 38, and then if you subtract 10, you get 28, your age.
There you go.
I don't know how that math works. So,
It landed.
those are our long-winded introductions and pleasantries. So if you look over here, you will see that we're going to talk about running a con event. We're going to talk about playing a con event. We're going to talk about instant AL adventure. What does that mean? Jay has some, I assume, time-honored and well-tested and honed tips for if you've suddenly just been handed an AL adventure and go, can you run this in half an hour? Does that sound like
that's exactly what I'm going to be talking about.
Right, so that's what we're going to talk about there. And then for our big finale of Disorganized Play today, we're going to have a DM's Kit duel. My DM's Kit versus Jay's DM's kit. Oh wow, they're about the same size.
I see your kit is as big as mine.
I expected yours to be a lot smaller.
No.
All right, very good. So we're going to compare head to head what's in the bag. So that's the plan. All right. So with all of those introductory remarks done, you know, the difficulty for me with this is because it's a conversation. I'm just like, let's talk. Hey, it's been a while. What's going on? When was the last time we played together? Whereas with Dom, he just kind of like nods and like, yes, you're smart, Tom. We all agree. You know, tap, tap, tap. So, in terms of running a con event, do you want to kick things off? What you think are like getting prepped, like running the table? We're going to talk about prep on a short notice, but do you have some general prep tips that you like to?
Yeah, I mean, obviously,
practices?
Yeah, sure. I mean, if you're a con veteran, I mean, obviously, you kind of know the deal. So I'm going to be talking more along the lines of folks who might not have DM'd at a con much, and To be completely frank, the thing about DMing at a con, I mean, the biggest difference about DMing at a con versus DMing at your table is, one, you're not usually running your own adventure.
Right. Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even know what adventure you're going to be running. Sometimes you don't really have a lot of control over what you're going to be running. Two, you're going to be running for a lot of new players, possibly a lot of people that you've never met and that you probably won't see. But you know, they are patrons of the con, and so it's your job as a DM to give them a good experience. And three, the setting is very, very different. You're not playing at a comfortable room that, you know, the layout of, you can't just get up and go to the kitchen to, you know, get a batch of snacks or a drink or anything like that. You're probably going to be running in a place that has multiple tables. Gen Con, I think the D&D area has about 100 tables of Dungeons and Dragons just in one setting. And they're
giant open arena. Yeah, kind of thing.
And they're usually pretty tightly packed together. You know, there are some smaller cons where you get a little more, you know, room to stretch out. Those are comfy, but you kind of have to be ready for whatever setting you're going into.
Well, and I think the implication there, like for me, the main implication there is not so much like, oh, you can't get up and just go over to the fridge or whatever, but the big one that I find impacts me as a DM is the amount of noise in the space.
Yeah.
And that's the toughest part, is like getting enough vocal traction and projection to make sure that everybody's hearing you, that you're hearing what everybody else is saying over that table next door who's like, "Oh, we attack!"
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, exactly. You know, cheering for their crits and, you know, like moaning the death of a PC. Yeah, exactly.
I think one other big factor that needs to be reckoned with is you're generally on a fixed time schedule, right?
Yes.
You have 4 hours, and that's maybe you can go 15 minutes over, but after that, like, you know, usually you can't. You know, usually that's as much squish as you can reckon. Whereas, like, if I'm running an Adventurers League event at like the local game store, I almost always go half hour over, and most people are like, you know, as long as you check in with the players, like, is it okay? The store owner doesn't care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and you also have the luxury of, you know, usually when you play at the store, there's still some degree of regularity. You get people who visit the store on a weekly basis. And so if you go over a little bit, continue it next week.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You don't get that at Gen Con.
Yes,
like,
yeah.
again,
It's like you've got to land that story beat.
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you got to stick that ending.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
So with those given kind of constraints, I think those are all pretty good, generally speaking. I think, you know, in terms of you don't know who's going to show up at the table, you will have I think it's important to realize that you'll have a combination of newbies who don't necessarily know how the game works, but also that you're going to have that veteran guy who might be a little impatient with those people.
Sure, yeah.
Or even, not necessarily impatient, but like bossy. Like, you need to roll those are the dice. Roll those dice.
Yeah,
you know? Like, so you have to be prepared for that kind of mix of who's going to show up.
Yeah.
And experience-wise, I think is most important. Obviously, you want to kind of accommodate, like, whether they're more combat kind of power gamers or they're role-playing people, but that's a step above just dealing with this person knows all the rules and wants to show everybody that, and this person doesn't really know any of the rules. They just kind of showed up because they want to find out what it's all about.
Yeah. Right.
So what do you think, you know, given those kind of, like, that's the kind of cauldron of experience that you're walking into or bathing yourself in, boiling yourself in, perhaps. Yeah. What do you do to prep for a general con game?
For me, the biggest concern is usually adventure prep. You know, making sure that you know the adventure well enough that you can give the people the experience that they're looking for. And you can adapt to all of these different kinds of personalities, you know, like the power gamer or the total noob. If you get a table full of power gamers, you know, you got to know the adventure well enough that you can adjust to that. If you get a table full of total noobs, that actually is a little easier than getting a table full of power gamers.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
But beyond, like, getting the adventure right, I mean, first of all, you got to prepare yourself for that. And so make sure that you're kind of physically aware of where you are and who you are. Pace yourself. When I DM'd for Gen Con, you know, usually, like, cons will have like you have to DM so many hours or so many games, and if you do that, we'll give you your room. You know, we'll give you your
free
badge.
whatever it
Exactly.
is. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I only went to Gen Con for 3 days, but that meant that to get the badge level, I had to DM I think like 5 slots. So that's a total of 20 hours of DMing, each slot being about 4 hours.
Yeah.
And so there was a day when I was DMing like 3 slots back to back, and then the next day I was DMing 2 slots. So pace yourself.
You wanted to have part of the day, one of the days to actually do some shopping.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, walk the dealer room, play your own game.
Yeah.
So yeah, the most important thing I think about going to a con is pace yourself.
Yeah.
So, if you can help it, don't DM multiple slots in a row. Usually, like put a slot in between the 2 slots that you're going to be running.
Yeah. Definitely, like my experience with Nazcrag is we used to have a slot that began at 5 and went to 9, and then we had a slot that started at 9 and went to 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And it got to the point where we couldn't find judges who were willing to stick around at 9 o'clock because they were burned out, after 4 hours of running an event for the table, and then knowing that they were going to kick it all off again at 9 o'clock and go till 1 in the morning.
Yeah.
And I think we all kind of like are susceptible to this myth that we're invulnerable and we're here for gaming, and man, we're going to do some hardcore gaming this weekend, and you just push yourself too far, and then that you find yourself like staring at the clock going, oh, it's only 10:15.
Yeah, it's gonna be a long slot.
Okay, how do I keep this moving?
And then there's the next day,
right?
If you've still got your voice.
Yeah. I want to chime in too on the knowing the adventure piece of it, which is when I sit down to, I've run a few AL adventures, just kind of like standalone, right? What I like to do is go through, and a lot of adventures will have kind of like a smorgasbord of like, in this portion they're traveling from point A to point B, and here are 5 different encounters that you could probably you could slot in. I will go through and just pick those ahead of time for one thing, but then I will also go through and edit down stuff that I think is filler that doesn't advance the plot.
Right.
Invariably, I find that AL adventures have some sort of combat encounter that's sort of front-loaded, and oftentimes you can either ignore that or kind of just gloss over it or cut it. I always look for opportunities to go, if I want to tighten things up on time, I would rather cut the fight at the front end and make sure I had a good boss fight at the back end than have the fight at the front end go long, and all of a sudden the boss encounter is like 2 rounds late, okay, and he's dead.
Yeah, right. You gotta hand wave that big bad.
Unsatisfying.
Yeah.
So I always, not only do I look for how can this adventure be interesting for the spectrum of players and be interesting for me and my spectrum of play, like I know what I'm better at than whatever, but also what can I prioritize and what can I deprioritize, and where do I want to kind of like help kind of bring this thing into a compact. I tend to find that AL events are a little bit overwritten. I don't know. Which is fine. I'd rather have more material than less.
Exactly, and that's what it is. They're meant to kind of give DMs a little bit of leeway to play the game that they want, tell the story that they want, so that characters can have different experiences.
Yeah. All right, so we've read the adventure. We have not over scheduled ourselves, hopefully. I will say on that note, I know I'm sitting here drinking soda right now, right? But when I'm running a con, I try to push off caffeine kind of as far as I possibly can.
Oh, sure.
Like I don't start the day with like slamming that Mountain Dew.
Yeah, no, I hear you.
I try to push that out as far as I can. Drink a lot of water.
Yeah. That's my main recommendation. Just have a bottle with you. A lot of cons will have water available to the attendees. If you need to, get one of your players to just ask one of your players at the outset of the game, hey, if I need water, do you mind getting up and running over and grabbing a bottle or something like that. Most players are usually pretty cooperative about that. They understand like what you're working with as a DM. But yeah, just take care of yourself. Have your water. Have like a couple of granola bars in your bag or something, or whatever snack you feel like.
I'm big on protein
or something.
Like protein heavy stuff.
Sure,
right? Like sugar, like the sugar rush caffeine combo is like not good. And especially like caffeine on an empty stomach doesn't do anything for me. Like I've got to have something in my system to push that caffeine.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so yeah, definitely take care of yourself as a DM when you're DMing at a con.
Yeah, I think it's important to know what your hard out is in terms of time. The other thing I was going to say about the water is what you don't realize. Hey, lay down, buddy. My dog is here. He's being bad. Yeah. Are you grumpy? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, get it the way you want it. He's rearranging his dog bed.
There you go.
There. All right. This is how we reward good behavior around here.
Works on people too.
I think what you don't realize is that the physical act of speaking drains you of water.
Yeah.
Right? Like just talking dries you out. So you gotta keep refilling and refilling.
Yeah.
The other interesting thing that I heard is I was listening to Fresh Air a couple weeks ago, and they were talking about kind of like brain health and whether you can eat healthy to like help your brain and stuff like that.
Sure. And
the woman who was the neurologist said the biggest thing is that your brain is X% water, and it's really susceptible to dehydration.
Yeah.
So if you start to get dehydrated, you actually like start.
Yeah, your functions kind of start.
Everything kind of slows down a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
So I think that's also a good reason to like stay hydrated.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, especially if you're going, multiple slots. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you just end up running 3 slots in a row.
Yeah. Sometimes you can't help it. You decide to volunteer, and that's fine.
Yeah. Exactly.
We've all been. Well, we've all.
Yeah.
All 2 of
hopefully
us have
you all
been
won't.
there. Yeah. Hopefully. DJ Phoenix, thank you so much. Don't keep in mind that your resubscription gives you a reroll that you can assign to somebody. Dom's in the chat to let you know who you can you can let Dom know who you want to assign that to. So that's cool. All right, so we've read the adventure. We know where we're going. We've brought our snacks and our water. We know what time is our hard out. What do you do when you sit down at the table and you're facing the new players?
Usually you kind of just have to launch. So the first thing that I do is make sure, first of all, that they're at the right table. Some players I've had some players realize that they're playing like a higher level table. They didn't come prepared with a higher level character, so on and so forth. That stuff has to get taken care of. But also, I mean, I usually like to, and I'm sure a lot of you DMs like to do this if you DM in public, is just give players a chance to introduce themselves to one another. So make sure that that's part of your prep. Part of the time and the pacing that you're giving yourself. What I like to do is, I have players introduce themselves by their real name and their player name, give a few details about their character name, and give a few details about their character. And that also gives me a chance to give everybody inspiration.
Yeah.
Like if they have, usually most players will have something interesting to say about their characters.
You hope.
More often than not. Sometimes it's too interesting, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm gonna work this into the DMDAL adventure.
So you use that as an opportunity to like make a little note and see if you can bring it into
exactly.
That's very clever. I like that idea.
And it gives the other players a chance to figure out how they want to interact with one another as well. How they want their characters to interact with one another. And so if they give a little interesting detail, I'll give them a point of inspiration. One thing to remember about cons too, and this is a pretty critical thing to understand. If you're feeling nervous about DMing at a con for the first time, just remember that everybody's in there aware that it's a con.
Yep.
And so usually you've got a lot of player buy-in, and usually like as a player, the DMs are kind of buying into that. You're playing in with a group of strangers, and we'll gather up as many details as we can about the players. We'll get you interacting as best as we can. Most players are there to have a good time.
Yeah.
And so
I think they also understand I'm sitting down at an AL event, and this whole thing is designed to be wrapped up in 4 hours.
Yeah.
So I can't go off and chase every weird, wild angle that, there's a certain amount of, okay, I understand the plot is going to be constrained in some way, shape, or form, and I'm going to conform to the constraint of that plot. Even if I think the hook is weak or I don't understand why my character would be on this adventure.
Yeah.
The players are going to accept that that's part of a convention one shot.
Sure,
I'm not gonna quit. Well, my player would never go off and help somebody like this. Like,
yeah, exactly.
They know that they have to like pick up whatever you're kind of spooling out there for.
Yeah.
Take the hook and run with it as quick as possible.
Yeah. And I mean, as a DM, you do have to understand that, sometimes you're gonna have to encourage players to do that. Look at them and say, well, okay, your character might not normally agree with, this other person's character, but in this particular instance, why don't we try to figure out how you two can work together?
Yeah. I think too, at the top of when you sit down, I think it's a great opportunity as a DM to make a table tent, both for in front of each of the characters. If some players do this, like I'm one of the players who will sit down and do this myself and make a table tent for myself and say what my class is, what level I am, what my armor class is, whatever, passive perception. It depends upon what you as the DM want on there, but I like to make one that sits in front of the players so that I can address that person either as them or in their character.
Sure,
but also a little set of initiative tents that I can put on the top of my DM screen.
Sure, yeah.
So that when we get into a combat, we know what the order is. So while you're doing those notes of introductions, here's who I am, here's what I've got, here's what my stunt is, you can also be
jotting down those notes for those cards.
Together.
What I've seen a lot of DMs do is they'll just have 3x5 index cards, like a stack of them in their DM kit, and they'll just pass them out to players. Say, hey, fold them up, just write down this particular information, just put them in front of you, and there you go. You don't have to worry about making custom tents or anything like that. It's a quick and easy solution. Even if they're not, I mean, I DM standing up, so even if they're not tents, if they just have like a sheet or like a photo in front of them, that's like something you can like call back to as well.
Yeah. I mean, we'll get to what's in our DM kit, but I think index cards are kind of the one essential item next to dice and the adventure. I think that's probably dice, adventure, writing utensil, and index cards can get you a long way. At a game. All right, we've done an intro. Then we get the game going. So let's talk a little bit about kind of like running a con event at the game. What do you like to keep in mind, or what are some tips that you'd like to impart?
Let's see. Well, this kind of goes into adventure prep. Should we just kind of launch into that, or do you want to keep a separate section? You want to sort of like portion that off a little later?
Well, I mean, if you want to talk about general adventure prep, or if we can leap over to kind of like. Why don't you give us like the long version? If you had as much time to adventure prep.
Oh, sure.
You know you're going to be going to Gen Con.
Yeah.
You got a couple days. You're going to be on the plane. Reading through the materials and whatnot. So what would you do if you had ample time to prep an adventure ahead of time?
Well, if I had ample time to prep an adventure, I mean, generally what I would do is, read through the adventure, really get to know what the adventure has to sort of spur players on. So usually that involves, who are the NPCs? Why are the adventurers talking to these NPCs? What are the locations? Are there any like cool little quirks about these locations that would encourage, is there like a dark corridor somewhere that they're going to want to explore? Let's see, what are sort of the circumstances around the adventure that's going to spur people on? That's the one thing that you really kind of have to keep in mind when you're DMing for a con game. Because of the time constraints, you really have to know like what's in the adventure and what tools you have to motivate the players to push their characters forward in the storyline.
I think it's something that kind of comes up in our regular DMing advice, but it's especially true in con games, which is you can't be too coy with information. Right?
Yeah.
I've come to appreciate being a DM as a process whereby you reveal information to the players, really. And I used to think of being a DM as a process where you had secrets that you kept from the players.
Sure.
But it's really exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Like if you have information on your side of the screen that the players don't learn, then they can't act on it. It never comes up in play. You might as well have written it on a stone and thrown it in a lake because it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and I mean, it's also important that you know what the players need to make informed decisions, so they're not like jumping into a situation and accidentally killing the party off.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or they're not investigating the wrong route that won't exactly lead the game to anywhere. You want to make sure that you're giving them the details that they need to push that story along. The story is what's going to hook them in, and finding the different aspects of that story, whether it's combat, whether it's exploration, whether it's interacting with a particular NPC. That's kind of what's going to bring them forward.
I think specifically with AL adventures, it's also incumbent upon you to pretty much every AL adventure that I've run anyhow has some sort of secret mission for one particular faction, right?
Yeah.
So you need to know what that is and which faction it applies to and how you're going to bring it in if it happens that you have somebody at your table in that faction. Because sometimes you sit down and you're like, a secret mission, and then they're like, who's a member of, who's a Harper, and for some reason nobody's a Harper, which is unlikely. But sometimes Lord's Alliance is one of those like weird factions where it's like no, everybody at the table is a Harper, and nobody's Lord's Alliance, and you're like, oh, well, I can just cut that whole storyline.
Well, on the other hand, too, that the factions sort of interact with one another in various ways. Like the Harper and the Zentarum have this big, this long-standing like rivalry feud going on.
Right.
So that's something else that you can key in on a character's aspect. You know what I mean? So if you have like something that the Harpers are going after, there aren't any Harpers, but there are a couple of Zentarum, you can say, hey, you know what? They're kind of looking into this, so it might behoove you and your faction to, investigate what's going on here. Keep your ears open, keep your eyes open.
Right. Yeah. I think that's definitely an element that kind of gets underplayed, or it gets included, but it doesn't get because the authors never know what the balance is going to be at the table. It's hard to write specifically for a particular faction, right? Like you can't tailor that experience. So I think it becomes incumbent upon the DM to be able to pick up and respond to who's at the table and highlight those relationships and those things. I think too, if you're sitting down and you're reading through the whole adventure, besides looking at like maybe what are some quirks or what are some built-in components that the various locations might have, I think getting to know kind of that final combat scene, what's the shtick? Generally, good authors put in some sort of, the big bad guy has this particular magic MacGuffin that they can use once or whatever it is. So figuring out what their capabilities are, kind of what you want to lead off with, and also how that might interact with where the final combat is likely to take place.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's worth some time thinking about, because what you don't want to do is get to that last climactic encounter and then you're flipping through, you're reading, what does this spell do? I don't understand.
Yeah, exactly.
What
does this monster like? What does this monster have that's like unique and interesting? Why did the author make this the setting, put the monsters in this way? So,
right.
Yeah.
And along those lines too, I find it very helpful, but it still is worth reviewing the whole kind of scale of each encounter, right? So if you read an AL adventure, it will tell you like it's designed for this level, this is considered a very weak party, this is considered a very strong party, and it will generally give you recommendations on how to tweak an encounter to make the challenge appropriate for whatever kind of level of average level sitting at the table. And I think looking at those so that you have an idea is definitely beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at those breakdowns, what I found works pretty well for me is that for the Adventures League, so again, like as Tom mentioned, there are these different scalings. It tells you how to scale a fight up or down depending on what the breakdown of your party is. I'll calculate the average party level as is recommended in the adventure, but I'll run the first encounter at normal, at like regular level.
Okay.
And I'll see how they do, because I mean, even if you have like all level 8 characters, if they're not power gamers, or if they're if you've got all level 5 characters and they really don't know how that character works because they just went up a tier, they could even like the scaling is a little can get a little unpredictable sometimes.
Right.
So yeah, I'll run the first combat at normal. And then I'll see how the party works together, how their characters work, whether they know what they're doing, whether they're still trying to feel things out, and then I'll go from there.
Yeah,
I'll make it easier or harder from there.
I think that's smart in terms of if they really bulldoze that first encounter.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, you've saved some time. You've learned something.
Yeah.
They've learned like kind of what each other can do or whatever.
Yeah.
Like.
And then you know what the next like the next encounter, maybe you should make it a little harder. Maybe the final boss you should play at the strongest setting or at the weakest setting for that matter. The other thing to keep in mind too, if you're reading through, just know how many combats generally there are. So that you can, if the first combat takes a longer time or if the second combat takes a long time, know how much you've kind of got ahead. So that you can figure out, okay, which of these can I cut? It's like what you mentioned, you know, which of these, is essential, which of these will move the plot along, which of these is just kind of experience point filler,
How do you deal with rules questions at the table? There's a variety of different kind of approaches to it, but
Sure.
I mean, it always comes up. I don't know what that spell does. Tell me about that ability. Or I thought it worked this way. Doesn't that happen? Like, do you have kind of like a basic, given that you're running a game that's in a constrained time slot, what's your approach?
My approach is just, as a DM, make that decision. I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the rules of Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. There are still some spells that I haven't quite, there's so many spells in that game. It's difficult, if not at all impossible, to memorize the nuances of every single one. So that's usually where like my biggest roadblock is, when somebody busts out a spell that I'm just not familiar with.
Right.
But like as far as like general rules, those I'm really comfortable with. Those I'll just say, well, you know what, it works this way. Let's go ahead and let's apply this to that situation, and then we'll move on. If it's something that really needs looking up, I'll have a player look up the rule while I move the game forward. And so I'll make a quick adjudication. I'll say, okay, well, let's handle it this way. While she looks the ruling up or the spell up on the player's handbook. If for some reason the ruling that I made is kind of like drastically contradicted by what they find in the PHB, I'll just roll it back as best as I can.
Retcon it.
Yeah, exactly. Make the smallest like change necessary to be able to keep the game moving.
Right.
Usually that's something that involves like hit points or burning a spell slot, you know what I mean? Or like just something critical like that. So if it involves a character burning a resource, I'll definitely roll that back. If it's just if it's like the success or failure of a check, then we'll see. You know what I mean? We'll see how the plot unfolds from there.
Have you had it come up? I'm sure you've had, and if so, how did you deal with it? With somebody who's very argumentative about how something happens, either with a ruling that you've made, or they see, because this I think is more common. I don't find that players fight with the DM about the way something works. Like, that's generally kind of written in stone, but they will fight with other players about the way that their character works. No, you can't do that. That's not allowed. How do you deal with those situations where things can get very abrasive and kind of destroy the table unity a little bit?
Oh, sure. It's the same thing. Just interject. Just remind everybody, hey, listen, we've got a limited amount of time to do this. If one player seems a little more knowledgeable about the other, I'll try to gently defer to that player and say, you know what, I think this person is correct about that ruling. So let's apply that, and if you want to take a look at it, out of your turn and look it up and see, we'll handle that when we can. Same thing.
Simath Pirnikov, thank you so much for subbing up 14 months.
Wow.
Very good. I look forward to receiving your reroll. Bitte schön. Simath is dialing in all the way from the Bundesrepublik Deutschland. So.
Oh wow, fantastic.
Sometimes it gets weird too. Sometimes it gets weird too when, the player comes from like say like a regular store game, and their DM has sort of been accommodating. Is like, oh yeah, sure, it works that way.
Yeah.
And then they come to a con table, and somebody else is like, no, you don't get double damage. When, you know, or like a classic thing would be like, you don't get your sneak attack damage when no one is directly adjacent to that guy.
Flanking that out last edition.
Yeah, exactly. Or do I have to get behind them or da 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 da?
Yeah.
So I think that part of it is tricky. You kind of have to kind of read it a little bit, and it is a matter of sort of asserting your authority as the DM. Like, you know what? It's not going to break the game. We're going to let this go for this point. And,
exactly. And I mean that's the thing too. I mean you don't necessarily have to have a heavy hand about everything. If somebody says, okay, well I'm flanking, so I should get I should get advantage. You say, well actually, in 5th edition we'll go ahead and let that push through now. But in 5th edition, flanking is not really a rule anymore. So it's kind of an optional rule. It hasn't been in the game for an edition now. So
yeah. All right. So I'm trying to think what else in terms of like running the game. Here's a tricky question.
Okay.
The clock is ticking away, and you're in that final fight, but it says he's got 120 hit points. And they're all over the place. 2 guys are down, and
they have no magic weapons. They're doing like half damage the entire time. Yeah.
What do you do at that point?
At that point, I mean, obviously, if you can go through the entire encounter, that's best.
Yeah.
If I have to adjust hit points, I've adjusted it in the past.
Sure.
Just to make it a satisfying thing for the players.
Right.
I think personally, if they're having a difficult time, adjusting the hit points so that they actually are able to, to defeat the bad guy. Well,
right.
If they're able to do it in an epic way in particular, you know what? Go for it. Go for it.
Yeah.
If it looks like they're having a hard time, but they're gonna beat the bad guy eventually, it's just not gonna happen in time.
Right.
Then
why not beat the bad guy?
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, when you look at a monster stat block, you can calculate. There's the average hit points. You will often calculate maximum hit points, but you can go the other way too and calculate minimum hit points.
True. Yeah.
So that's also
it's
part
an
of the
average,
game.
right?
Yeah, exactly.
I think too, particularly in AL, I believe that most characters are tougher than they appear on paper.
Yeah.
And so I can play the monsters a little more ruthlessly, but I will do that in terms of knocking somebody down. I won't do that in terms of trying to murder their PC, like invoke a sacrifice, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing for bad dice rolls.
Yeah, exactly.
To sheet kill, and for those of you who are not familiar, if you get knocked down, but you come back from your do you want to explain what sheet death is? I don't know that I'm going to give a concise explanation.
Yeah, sure. So in 5th edition, if you're knocked down to 0 hit points, you're unconscious. You have several opportunities to get yourself back up. Yeah, back up in the party. Even if you don't ever get back up, but the party wins, your character is technically still alive and can still get resurrected, get revived, and get the rewards from the game.
You have to have a certain amount of money though in order for that to happen.
Yeah,
right?
you do, or
the party can chip in.
Yeah,
or
exactly.
Somebody can sponsor you.
Yeah, or they can cast a spell to bring you back up.
Right.
And stuff
in the event that there is no healing magic, resurrection magic available, and the party isn't willing to cough up the money to have you rezzed.
Yeah.
That's when you're sheet dead.
Yeah, your character is just right out dead. And in the Adventurers League, if a character is dead and just can't be brought back, that character's gone. It's basically like wiped out from the fiction.
Yeah.
And so, Adventurers League players, we get attached to our characters because once they're dead, they're dead. There are ways to get them back under a lot of different circumstances, but there are some cases where they're like, particularly season 7, because of the trope of Tomb of Annihilation, like if you get a bad dice roll, your character is just wiped out from existence.
Yeah.
And it's pretty heartbreaking.
There's been a lot of stuff in the past couple of seasons where I played Princess of the Apocalypse, but the what's the Underdark one?
Oh,
Lords of
No, Out of the Abyss.
Out of the Abyss.
The
I
Rage
played Out of the
Demon
Abyss.
season.
Yeah, the Rage of Demon season.
Yeah.
And that was pretty weird because your characters progressively got more and more insane as they went along. And you started getting stuff that you get madness points that you could not get rid of. And it's an interesting way to kind of inflict punishment on the players that doesn't involve killing them. But
Sure, yeah. It just makes their characters a little more interesting.
My point mostly being, just to bring it back around, that I don't mind knocking players out or knocking characters down.
Yeah.
But I'm not a big fan of, okay, well then the bad guy hits him and that's 2 death saves that you failed, and what are you all gonna do? I'd rather let the players fail bad dice rolls and have opportunities to intercede on behalf of a dying character. And if the guy dies, that's on everyone, rather than be kind of full throat.
Sure,
At a con game, it's tough, right? And my home game, it's a totally different thing. Or here, it's a totally different thing.
Yeah, if you're with people that you know who you know will deal with the situation well, that's one thing. But I mean, when you're playing at a con, that's the other thing that I want to bring up too. Especially if you're playing with new players, folks who are at that con and trying D&D out for the first time. You don't necessarily want to be ruthless with them, because that can end up turning somebody off of the game. It's one thing, again, for bad dice rolls, or if folks are kind of making questionable decisions.
Yeah, that's always tricky, right?
Yeah, and then that's what I mean about how, going back to making sure that the players have the information that they need to make knowledgeable decisions. It's important for you to do that, especially with new players, because you don't want a new player saying, oh yeah, I should be able to handle that, I should be able to handle that goal all by myself. No, you go, no, it looks like this thing can kill you if you're not careful.
I think, too, that when you have a situation where the players are making either odd decisions, or they keep kind of like questioning the same thing, or they're tiptoeing around the situation, and I had this come up in my own home game this past weekend, it's incumbent upon you to stop and take a minute and go, have I explained what's happening correctly?
Yeah,
right?
as appropriately as I can.
Have I made it clear exactly what the situation is? Because, in my home campaign, we picked up from the previous session, and one of the players was completely confused about what the circumstances of the ending of last session was. And I was just like, let's get into the action. We got a lot to do today, da-da-da. And he kept saying, like, I'm looking around for these guys, like for this cage that these guys were in, and I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And so finally it turned out that he thought that this cage that they had found had fallen into the water, and he was looking around for it.
Okay.
And I was like, no, the cage was above the water. It was swinging empty, and you saw that there were ripples in the water.
Yeah,
And he was like, oh, well, that's totally different than them being trapped inside this cage.
Sure,
and potentially
unable
drowning,
to, like, swim.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when you're faced with a situation like that where the players are either making questionable decisions or really stumbling on something, it can be a red flag for you to go, did I explain this to the extent that I'm, allowed to, or that was appropriate?
Yeah.
And if not, do I need to restate, just so you're clear what's going on here? And sometimes I'll do that here on stream too. It's like, just so you understand, there's a large rock that's 30 feet tall, and then down below is this pool.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I thought it was like a waterfall. No?
Yeah, that's definitely useful in a con, is recapping just a few seconds of recap of what happened like the round or two before, when you get to somebody else's turn. You know what I mean? So, you made this decision, this happened, what do you want to do next?
Yeah, a great piece of advice, which I know I'm guilty of it, of breaking it as an author, and I think it's easy when you sit down to write an adventure to detail everything that's in the room, because you want the DM to know, like, oh, okay, so there's this lever over here that does this pit trap that's covered by a rug, and there's a fireplace on the other side, and then beyond that, this golden portal, and you describe this really interesting room, right? Because you're like, oh, there's a lot to explore.
Yeah.
But most players, when they're listening to you describe this thing, can only retain 3 things. And once you get to 4, 5, or 6, they start forgetting either 1 or 2 or the least important ones. You're never sure which ones they're forgetting, right?
Yeah,
It's like, hey, you know that there's a fireplace over there with a fire in it, right? Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, yeah, did you? Yeah, I guess somehow I missed that.
Yeah, right.
So I think that's always like, it's easy to write a big block of box text or whatever.
that has all this stuff in it, but when you get done, it's important to go, so you see.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, ideally, you don't have to do that, right? Ideally, it's written so that the room kind of unfolds like, you know, a piece of origami where you're like, okay, well, here's what's written on this piece of paper. But, you know, that's not always the case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Part of the prep that, you know, that I would do for running a con game also is just making sure that I know the maps. And, you know, making sure that I have the tools to kind of lay that out in front of a player. And, you know, you'll see that in my kit when we kind of unveil it. I'm sure you probably have something visual that you can pull out too, if you need to. But yeah, actually, there are folks who will like pre-draw maps. I like drawing maps on the fly as I'm describing the room. So, you know, as you're describing the room, okay, it's this big, there are doorways here, 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 and here. There's a fireplace here. You're actually like drawing everything. What that does is that it keeps players' attention on the description of the room.
Yeah.
And focused on what's going on there, rather than, you know, you're kind of just talking about, rather than just reading the box text and maybe losing somebody to their phone or having somebody just kind of miss a particular piece of information.
Are you a big fan of miniatures most of the time, or theater of the mind most of the time, and maybe some miniatures?
I'm definitely a fan of miniatures, especially in like con settings and public settings when you don't know the players. You don't necessarily know like what their attention spans are or how well they process verbally, and so I'm a big fan of having, you know, at least some representation of what's going on in front of them. Whether it's to scale or not, that depends on what the particular scenario needs. Like generally, for most combats, I'll do like scaled combat on a grid. But if there's like a large area that they're wandering around, like there's a particular AL adventure that the players are wandering on like an island with 3 different lizard tribes and stuff. And that one, I'll just draw a representation of the island, say it's not to scale, it'll take you this long to get from one end to one end. Let's go nuts.
Yeah. That brought up something that I wasn't. Oh, I think too. Also having miniatures. So I think I can run a combat like a little loosey-goosey, a little bit faster doing theater of the mind. And if it's not a major combat, then I don't mind doing it as theater of the mind, right? But when you get into, say, a boss fight or a key encounter, especially because you've got a table of strangers, when you draw that stuff out, it minimizes having to restate what the combat situation is in a room. So we just talked about like having to restate, okay, here's the description of the room, right? But because combat is in flux and, you know, I mean, it's not necessarily unreasonable for the person who's last in the initiative order to tune out when this person here is taking 5 minutes to take their turn and they can't make up their mind. Okay, fine. But then you have to restate like what the current situation is. Whereas if you have miniatures on the map that you're moving around and drawing a representation of, okay, so Wall of Thorns comes up here, or whatever it is, then at least they can look down and check in. And if they have a question, they go, who's this guy?
Yeah, exactly.
I attack that guy.
Yeah.
It gets rid of a lot of kind of like confusion about the rules and the status of the combat.
Absolutely. How big is this room again? How far away am I from this person? You know, the worst that I've gotten from something like that is how high is the ceiling?
Yeah,
you know,
it's a classic.
You can't really depict how high the ceiling is on. Well, you can. There are ways, but
all right. So I think we've talked a lot about running an AL event. I don't know, if you folks in chat have a question about running an AL event. You know, go ahead and pop it up, and we'll get around to it. But let's just talk briefly about playing in a con game. So, what's your approach to? So you brought up an issue that is kind of one of my favorite things to discuss because I've come down on a couple different ways on it. But let's discuss both as a DM and as a player where you land on technology at the table, because it's a very hot button topic.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. And you know, if you have questions, it doesn't have to be just about an Adventurers League event. That's kind of like the focus of what we're talking about, but also just a one-shot con game in particular is what we're really here to like. That's what Jay is a is, I would say, an expert on running AL events, but this isn't necessarily just limited to an Adventures League discussion.
Yeah,
right?
there are different games being played at cons all the time.
We're here to get you prepped for Gen Con as much as we can. So, thanks, Critter Nation. Yeah, of course, I was happy to. I did a class with Sumali back in the day when I first moved to LA. We were in acting class together, and she gave me a call and was like, I'm on this. I'm doing this D&D thing. I'm like, oh yeah, and she's like, let's talk about D&D. So
That's awesome.
So we did, yeah. So my big question to you is, both as DM and as player, where do you land on technology at the table? Whether it is an iPad, a laptop, or a phone, what's your preference on either side of the screen?
I still run everything on paper because when you're running at a con, you're not always guaranteed power.
Yeah.
So I want to make sure that I have everything in front of me. I don't want to have to worry about my laptop or my phone or my tablet battery dying or anything like that. And it's just sort of what I'm used to. So.
What I like to do with Adventures League module is, first of all, like, find the pages that I don't need.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Don't print those.
Just dump those out. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the first 3 pages or so or something like that.
It's always boilerplate. That like, once you learn it, it's fine. But I also like to print it off on booklet size.
Oh, sure.
And at least have it like half, full 2 pages.
Sure.
It is, a little bit like, depending on the lighting, it can be tricky.
Yeah.
But I like to have the physical thing there so that I can write notes and highlight stuff.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I hear you.
That's the great thing about having a piece of paper is I can flip back and forth very easily. I find if I have the PDF on my iPad or whatever, and then they go, oh, okay, the stat blocks are on the back, and you're like,
yeah, exactly. You're gonna like shuffling
okay,
through.
hang on.
Yeah,
that's my angry iPad motion. So that's what I like about having it printed off.
Yeah, same here.
What about as a player, in terms of a player?
As a player, you know what? To be completely honest, as long as it's not distracting them, I'm fine. I'm fine with folks having their phone or their laptop. I mean, a lot of people are running digital tools so much nowadays, like D&D Beyond or D20 Fight Club or whatever app they happen to have on their phone that tracks their initiative or spells or stuff like that. So if I find that, and this is really rare that I find somebody distracted by their electronics, I'll just say, it's okay if you use that for playing the game, but just kind of, if you could just pay a little more attention, keep us up to speed so that we can keep everybody running, so that you're not burning everybody else's seconds when we finally get to you.
Yeah.
Just give them a gentle nudge.
I used to be very kind of anti-technology at the table because I found that it was super distracting and whatnot. But, my wife is sort of an introvert, and which actually was somewhat of a surprise to me. Like, one of the ways that we met was over Twitter, and she was very tweeted a lot. And I was like, oh, how can she be an introvert? She's like constantly, tweeting or whatever. But for her phone is like her safety device when she gets like overloaded with too much socialization, or like in that instance where we talk about like one person is having a big disagreement with another person about how something works or what you should do. Like, her way of dealing with that is not to engage in the conflict, but to sort of like retreat. Like, this is her shield against getting overloaded with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm much more forgiving now about it. And my rule is, do I have to repeat myself?
Yeah, there you go.
And regardless of whatever's at the table, whether you've got, your lunch at the table or your phone or your laptop or whatever the distraction is, when I come around to you, if I have to repeat myself, especially something that like I just made clear 2 minutes ago, that's when it's like, okay, like, I don't need to phone shame you. I need to, like you said, pull you in. Like, okay, can you pay a little bit more attention? We just covered that. Try and stay with us.
Yeah, exactly. And that's whatever. That's where like a player recap goes as well. So that's where that helps draw people back into the game too.
So if you're going to go play at a one shot, what do you think? What's some good advice in terms of what do I show up with, and then what is my role at the table? What can I do to contribute to? Because I think players don't always fully embrace the fact that it's their game as much as it's the DM's game, right? And they're just as responsible for trying to land that final encounter at the 3 hour and 35 minutes mark or whatever it is.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. I mean, yeah, and I mean, everybody, in the end, everybody's kind of responsible for everybody else's fun. you know?
Right.
It's not just the DM trying to manage everybody else. Every player should be contributing to that as well.
I'm going to steal the easy ones from you. You should show up with your character sheet, your own dice, your own writing utensils, and something to take notes on.
Yeah, yeah, those are good.
Maybe a PHB if you feel like you need to lean on the rules, or you're playing like a druid and you have a bunch of like animal forms that you don't have on your character sheet. Like you should have that rules reference. But like to me, that's the bare minimum, and it drives me absolutely bonkers when a player shows up and they don't have something to write with, and they don't have something to take notes on.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm more forgiving about like, oh, I don't have a piece of paper. Fine, you can have a piece of my paper.
Yeah, usually
I
you got
hate
something,
sharing
right?
pencils. It drives me nuts.
Yeah, well, yeah, for me it's because it walks. I mean, I'm usually ready, you know, because I play in public so often.
Yeah.
But yeah,
You have some garbage pencils that you give
exactly.
away.
After all, I'm like, wow, they're just gone. I can't write anything myself. So.
Dom, write this down. Saving throw branded pencils.
Oh, there you go.
Done. We can give them away at the con. Oh, you don't have something to write with? Here, take this. It's yours. It has our logo on it. Come watch our show.
Yeah, totally. No, that's awesome. Let's see. And even the dice, I can kind of be forgiving about that. You know, sometimes you'll get new players. Sometimes you'll get people who are kind of just, you know what, I ended up with 4 hours free at this con. I'm going to go play some D&D. I'm not quite ready, but,
I
you know.
don't like sharing dice
So,
either.
oh, yeah. No, I have sets. I have, like, specific loner
You have
sets.
loner dice.
I have loner dice, yeah. Again, because I play with a lot of new players and play out in public. But I think if you're an experienced D&D player, just know how your character works.
Yeah.
That's like the biggest. Even if you've just leveled up prior and you don't know, like, you don't exactly know how the spells you've picked work, if that's the case, put down like the page number right next to that spell listing on your character sheet, so you can look it up real quickly. You don't have to worry about flipping too many pages or anything like that.
Now, I think if you're new to the character, you know, so we kind of had this situation with Sumali where she was dropped. She was given this 5th level druid character, and she had to get familiar with it. And I said, like, there were 2 big tips that I gave her. One was, let's color code your dice. So rather than going and buying the standard box of Chessex or whatever dice that you prefer, like pretty, sparkly, whatever, you know, with streaks and different on a. I mean, I love dice, but for a new player, I got her two purple D20s, and then like a green D12 and a yellow D8 and white, you know, D6s. And, you know, so I made sure that each different type was a different color.
Yeah.
And not so much so that she could learn them necessarily, but so that whoever was playing with her could go, it's the yellow ones.
Yeah, it's the green one, or the D20s and D12s
because
in particular.
If they're all the same color, then they go, no, it's the 12-sided one. And the newbie is looking at these things going,
trying to count sides.
Yeah, they're trying to, and you start like turning them around or whatever. So that's one of the tips that I had for her. The other thing that I said was, take your spells and kind of divide them into an offensive thing that you like to do, a defensive thing that you like to do, and maybe like this is your miscellaneous.
This is the weird wacky effect spell.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you don't have to know everything that your character does, but if you can pick those top 3 of like, this is what I use in combat, and this is what I use if I get in trouble or someone gets in trouble, and this is what I do when we're not in combat and I want to be weird and you know, spooky. Perfect. Like that's all you need to know for your character. But have a familiarity with what your character.
Exactly. And I mean, as a DM, if you're DMing at a con, if you're playing with a lot of new players, they'll probably be starting out with a low-level character. The spells are usually pretty easy to manage. I mean, if you've been DMing for a while, you'll know a lot of the spells. So just be ready with like a 1 or 2 sentence description of what a spell might do, so that you can guide a player to say, okay, try this one out, try this one out. These spells will hit that one that creature all the way across the room. These are the spells that you'll be using to heal people whenever you need to.
Yeah. I think conversely, there's a little bit of a danger of being too eager to help, right?
Sure.
Like,
This is true.
It can get very, like, you can very easily cross over into like mansplaining territory if you're not careful with, you know, with volunteering your knowledge and your information.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like,
no, absolutely.
I think it is helpful to come to the table with the assumption that everybody knows how to play their character the way they want to play their character. And if you've decided that they want their character should be played differently, that's a problem that you have. You know, I've seen people get like they get worked up because that's not the optimal thing that their character should that character should be doing right now. And unless they're actively killing the party,
exactly,
then I don't think it's your place to impose your type of fun on that person.
Yeah, precisely.
Right?
I mean, you know, I think the big thing is, okay, you know, if you're playing with somebody new, somebody you've never played with, just understand that they're going to have a completely different way of playing the game as you. And so, yeah, if it's not ruining the fun for the table, you know, if what they're doing is just kind of affecting their character, or it's actually giving everybody a laugh and they're fine with it, let them do it. Yeah, just let them go. If the table is having a really just unfun time because somebody's making a decision that they don't necessarily agree with, then you know you might want to like talk to the DM about that too. You know what I mean? Bring it to their attention, or talk to the player. Just again, don't be too heavy-handed about it. Just be cordial. You know, I
think it's really tough while a game is running.
It is, to
have that moment, right?
It can be.
You can. I think you can maybe have that conversation with the DM afterwards. I don't know. And if they're dramatically ruining your fun, then I think you have to try and intercede, right?
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, as a player, again, there's that level of buy-in where you say, okay, well, I guess I may just have to make the most out of this, you know, out of a tough situation,
right?
You know,
I think that's. In terms of being a player at a convention game, I always liked to sign up me and my 3 buddies, and we would all go play together.
Sure.
I don't know that was always a great experience for like the other 2 people at the table, because we all clearly knew each other and had a rapport, although we tried to be inviting and make everybody else part of the team too, right? Yeah. Like you have to go into it knowing, I'm going to try to be part of the team, but also this is going to be a game run by somebody I don't know, an adventure that I don't know anything about, with other people that have a different idea of what's cool in D&D.
Yeah.
And sometimes you take a loss on that. Yeah. Right? You go, well, I tried my best for those 4 hours and got whatever I could out of it. Yeah. But it wasn't a great game.
Yeah. And you know, the next game will probably be better. The next game might just be a
part.
completely different
Like that's the best part of it is there's a next game.
There is,
right?
exactly.
Like not every game can be a great game. And I know I've certainly run games that were flops. I've certainly played in games that were flops. And it's tough when, you know, if you're like me, I get to go to maybe 2 conventions a year or 3 conventions a year. And so those 1 or 2 days that at each con that I get to spend playing feels really precious.
Right? No, I know what you mean.
But I also get to, I run a game every week here. I have my own home game. I play pickup games. Like there's other gaming to be had. Yeah. So don't get super invested that every single session has to be great.
Yeah.
But
as a player, definitely,
know your character and come to the table knowing that you're going to be part of the team, whatever that means.
Yeah.
Right.
Definitely have that buy-in because you're going to be cooperating with a group of strangers. So.
I would say, in terms of being a player, the biggest piece of advice that I would give is take notes. That's just like and however detailed you want to make that. Great, but like if that means you're gonna draw a little map, whether it's useful to anyone else or not, you're gonna draw a map. You're gonna write down who the NPCs are. You're gonna keep track of how much firewood you've spent or whatever. Whatever the weird
just
thing
sort of
is,
what
whatever that means
you
to
need
you.
To track. Yeah.
But I find that writing that stuff down as you go along helps keep me anyhow engaged in listening to the DM. Paying attention to what the other players are doing, etc. And it also keeps me away from getting distracted on my phone or tuning out or all of a sudden like going, oh, okay, well, what's even our decision that we're facing here?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, as a DM, when I have, if I have a player who takes notes at the table, that's like a lot of lifting that I don't have to do.
Yeah.
If I have to clarify something that they've written, then obviously that's fine. But if a player asks a question, hey, wait a minute, weren't we supposed to talk to this person? And another player chimes in, yeah, they're in this location and they asked for this. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, it means that it shows the other players that somebody's paying attention. Maybe they should too. And that's something that I don't have to go back over them. That's a responsibility that they help me out with.
I think along those lines, an advanced player move that I have seen is someone at the table will keep track of initiative for the party.
Oh, sure.
Let's roll for initiative. Okay, and then somebody at the table, on the, at the player side of things, goes, "Okay, what did you get?" And they write it down. What did you get? And they are the initiative wrangler. And for me as the DM, I'm like, oh. Now I can look at, okay, what's the starting, combat circumstances? What are the, okay, am I going to open up with this? What's going to happen? Like, that piece of it is like that piece of, it's really tedious, I find, to collect initiative, but nobody else does it. So I'm like, all right, it's part of my DM duty to line up the little table tents across the top. And I'm just so gratified when somebody at the table goes, hey, don't worry, I got it. Okay, so we're going to start over here with the Dwarven Paladin, and next is the Rogue, and the Cleric's going to go.
That's definitely handy when you're running a game on the fly. And that's the thing about some con games that you have to understand too. Again, we talked about this earlier. You don't always know what adventure you're going to play or you're going to be running.
Right.
Even if you've prepped a specific adventure, sometimes depending on the needs of the con, you may get shuffled out of your table onto another table with a completely different adventure. And I've seen DMs just pick up a table, run an adventure cold, just like reading the adventure off as they go. Some adventures are much, much better suited for that. Some are not.
Yeah.
But yeah, whatever help you as a player can give that DM, it's a very welcome thing.
I think I don't know. It's like I know we should move on to our next topic.
Sure.
We kind of brought that up, but I think in terms to put a bow on, as a player at a con experience, the last piece of advice I would give is read the table, right? So if the table is really heavy into role playing and they're enjoying that, like ride along with that. Engage with that on whatever level you want. On the other hand, if the table is very kind of like dour power gamery, kind of like they just want just want the mechanics and they don't care about role playing at all, then don't be that person who's going to do like a 4-minute monologue, dramatic reenactment of whatever. So find the temperature of the table when it comes to that kind of spectrum of role playing versus manipulating mechanics.
Exactly. And it's the same thing. Like if you have a table of new players, just see who has any kind of experience at all, who doesn't, and kind of help them move the game along at their pace too, and be ready to help out. If the situation really looks like they need it.
I'm trying to think. There was that popped up another thing in my mind that I can't remember what it was.
Okay, all right.
But yeah, it's something about. There's just something about like being gracious with everyone's attention. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So it's the same thing with the rules continuum, right? Like if the table's not clear on the rules, you don't have to monopolize everyone. You don't have to monopolize everyone's attention by telling them what all the rules are.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, there's something there. It'll come back around. I don't know if there's any other tips in terms of being a player. Show up ready to play, and help. Be a part of the whole. Be a part of the team.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, be a model for the other players too. Help kind of like move things along. Again, buy into the adventure as best as you can. If time is an issue, make sure you chime in and let folks know what you think might be a good course of action to do if they're like really kind of waffling or they don't necessarily know. I mean, I guess be proactive about helping other people make decisions as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And again, there's a balance to kind of strike when you're doing that.
I think that's maybe what I was thinking of is that if you've got newbies at the table, your job is not just to play, but also to be an ambassador for the game and to open up their imagination their inspiration for the game,
Yeah.
rather than shutting them down. Oh, it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Why are you doing that?
Yeah,
No, that doesn't.
you know,
That's
I
not
really
right.
think we need to go this way.
Yeah,
No, not
yeah.
necessarily. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
find you know, there's always exceptions to that kind of rule, but when you see people who are new and who are trying to get their mind around, like, oh, okay, and they get excited, and
Yeah.
and D&D, I find, has a lot of learned culture behind it,
Yeah.
that is opaque to anybody who's new to the game.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like, oh, okay, you see a giant plant monster rise up on two legs, and it's got weird roots growing out of its face, and it's got these giant arms, and the wizard goes, oh, okay, I'm gonna lightning bolt it, and then you yell,
Right,
no!
Yeah, that's a bad idea. Yeah, no.
And the player is like, they have no idea that they've quote unquote done something wrong.
Yeah,
right? Like, oh
yeah,
no, you're falling
exactly.
for a classic D&D trap.
Right.
Like,
Sometimes,
like,
yeah.
like let them have the gift of finding out why that's a trap.
Yeah,
you know? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You know, unless it's really gonna kill the party. Like,
Yeah, again, unless it's really making things unfun for the group, then.
I think that's the tricky part, right? Is like you make things more unfun for the newbies when you spring that surprise on them of like, no, you're doing something bad, even though they don't know.
Yeah,
you're doing something bad.
yeah, right, exactly.
So
Exactly.
that's tricky. All right. So our next topic. We're gonna run a little long today, obviously.
just a little, wow, okay.
We bit off way more than we could chew here, obviously, right? Did you park out front?
I did.
All right.
I did.
Dom, can you do a car check quick?
Yeah, I will.
All right. So let's talk about, like you said, there's situations where you've decided to DM and get your hours at a con, and you're trying to earn, and the captain who's running the area is like, Jay, I got this table over here. They're tier 2. They here's the adventure. I know you're planning on running whatever your thing, but it's tier 1. But
Sure. Like,
here you go.
Okay, so
Like-
what do you do?
yeah,
Right.
yeah. You've got when this has happened to you, what's kind of like the amount of time that you have to prep? Like half an hour, 15 minutes?
I've been
an hour?
really fortunate. The shortest amount of time that I've had to prep an adventure was between slots, so that was an hour. But I mean, that's an hour that I have to go get something to eat, and then have the adventure handed to me, and then figure out like what's going to make the adventure compelling.
Right.
I know DMs who were handed a copy of a module like right as the slot began, and they just sat down at the table, they slapped the module down, they're like, okay, here we go. And they'll just kind of go through the module, like, reading through the module as best they can as they can.
Yeah. I've had DMs like pull up Dropbox on their phone and like,
Oh,
okay,
sure.
let's see. Yep, we're gonna do this one.
Sure, yeah.
Like,
yeah.
I don't think that was a no prep, but it was definitely like, oh, it was one of those things where it was a pickup game at the game shop, and they didn't know who was going to show up with what characters.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And so it was one of those deals where like everybody had a 6th level character. It's
Yeah.
like, oh, I guess we're playing a tier 2.
Right,
Let
yeah,
me see what I've got
yeah.
that's a tier 2. Ran the whole adventure off their phone. That was incredible.
Yeah. Oh no, I've had to do that a couple of times. Again, not unprepared. It was an adventure that I'd run before. And that's the nice thing about the Adventurers League is that you sort of have this set of adventures, or like a particular storyline that you can kind of go back to and help folks with, or rather, run folks through.
So you've got an hour, then you got to run. What do you do?
Okay. Let's see. So when you finally get that module in your hand, I mean, obviously, the first thing you need to do is you start reading through it. But there are certain things that you should look for as you're reading through an adventure. The first thing is most Adventurers League adventures have an encapsulation of the adventure, like a little recap in the very beginning of the adventure. So take a look at that, read through, kind of figure out where it starts, where it's got to go, where the characters, begin, where they end. From that synopsis, you can usually get a sense of what information the characters will need to know. And so with that in mind, you start going through the module, start figuring that out, like trying to pick out what exactly it is they need to figure out. Here, hold on, let me take a look at my notes.
Yeah.
Where'd you go? I've sort of I have this like presentation that I do on adventure preparation, and I've broken it down into 3 different time spans. There's little to no time, which is about 10 minutes to an hour before play. And if you get an adventure like just right there in your hand, like right before a slot, most of the players at that slot will understand. If you say, hey, can I just take 10 minutes to kind of look through this adventure, make sure that I've got everything straight, take that time, give yourself that time.
I will also maybe give them a task.
Yeah. Oh,
You know,
sure. Yeah, yeah.
Either
yeah.
like, hey, why don't you fill out our Adventures League paperwork?
Yeah,
or-
exactly. Take down everybody's AC.
Exactly.
And,
Yeah. Make your little table tents and whatnot.
Sure, yeah. Or introduce yourselves to one another and just try to kind of peripherally pay attention to that. So if you have about 10 minutes to an hour, read the overview of the adventure at the beginning. From that, you should get a sense of what the overarching goals are and what NPCs come into play. Like usually the adventures will also have a list of NPCs at the very beginning that say, okay, this is what this person does in this adventure. This is what they ask of the adventurers. If it's not a little sidebar in the beginning, there's usually an appendix at the very end of the adventure that'll tell you that too. So, you read the encapsulation, you read the synopsis, you know what the circumstances are, you read the NPC descriptions, you know who's going to set the adventurers off on this particular series of events. Very, very important for the Adventurers League adventures is to look out for where the rewards are. Like, where do you find the magic item? Where are all the potions, stashed in an adventure? So usually as I'm looking through an adventure, there are these treasure sections, little paragraphs that outline what kind of treasure you received in your adventures. I pay very close attention to those because if you miss where a magic item is, the thing about the Adventurers League is once characters have played through a particular scenario, they can't go back and play that scenario again if they missed anything. So if they missed the magic item, which can be a pretty big deal, they just don't get that magic item. They don't necessarily get a shot at that magic item again.
And I don't know if it's still the case, but at least when I was very actively playing Adventurers League stuff, everyone knew that we're going to play this thing for 3 hours, and at the end of it, we should have found 2 magic items.
Yeah, right.
And so if you don't, when they get to the end, there's this big conversation that happens at the table. They're like, "Well, wait a minute, where was the magic item?
Yeah,
where was
exactly. I wanted
and
that.
Sometimes you have players who know exactly what it was, and they're like, "Where's the Staff of the Woodlands?"
Yeah.
Where did we miss it?
Yeah, absolutely. So know where the rewards are. Know just generally where the adventurers can find the really big ticket items at the very least. So let's see. You've read the overview. You kind of have a general idea of what the NPCs are doing. You kind of are looking out for where the adventure rewards are. Tom gave a really great piece of advice. Know what you can cut. Know what you can try to figure out what you can cut and what you can't. And again, you're going to get a better idea of that thinking about things in terms of the overall synopsis of the adventure.
I always try and evaluate things in terms of what information do they learn out of this encounter that then leads them to another encounter.
Yeah.
Right? And if I can't find that thing, if it's just, they're sailing on a raft down the river and then they get attacked by bullywugs.
Sure, yeah.
I will go, they don't need to get attacked by bullywugs because the bullywugs they're an obstacle to be overcome, but they don't reveal anything new.
Yeah. But if they're sailing down that river and they encounter kobolds that have a prisoner or that have a backpack that has a particular book or a scroll that they need to find, there you go. You need to be able to make sure you know that, and you need to make sure you're able to kind of give that to the players.
Goblin Cave asked the question: are Adventurers League games actually like that, where players will just grind for loot like World of Warcraft or whatever? That's a certain dynamic, right? I don't want to say that everybody's like that.
Yeah.
But here's my quick take on it. You can chime in with your elucidation however you want. Mm-hmm. I feel like in Adventurers League, your stats are fixed, your hit points are fixed, you've got a limited palette, not so much anymore, but you've got a limited number of legal races and class options, and there's really no room for homebrewing. And on top of it, you generally don't have a choice over what the adventure is going to be like, where it's going to be set. who your DM is going to be, or for that matter, who else is going to be at the table, and you have this very rigid set of strictures that are around you, and then so the only thing that you can really kind of control is like you're hoping to get that magic item. You're hoping to get like loot becomes the one thing that sort of differentiates you, and even that is somewhat rigidly controlled.
Yeah.
So that's where I think it kind of like falls into this mentality of like, oh, is it worth it for me to play this because it'll help make my character more powerful?
Sure.
Or not?
Yeah.
Not always the case, but I think because you're not rolling for hit points, because you're not rolling, a set of stats.
Yeah.
Your
stats are a little more balanced.
You start fighting.
Yeah.
You start fighting the system in whatever small rebellious way that you can.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in Adventures League, you can play like the hardcover adventures, the longer overarching campaigns, and you can play like specific one-shot adventures. And the one-shot adventures always have a magic item. Like, well, no, I'm not going to say always. They mostly almost always have a magic item that you can win. And so sometimes when you go in, like after you've done it for a few sessions, you know that if you're playing these one-shots, you know that there's going to be a magic item in there. So that is something to look forward to. Unlike, a hardcover adventure where you could be playing multiple sessions and not get a magic item. You just don't know necessarily.
I think too, like, that's the kind of, slot machine kind of reward mechanism, right? Because you're going to play for 3 hours or 3.5 hours, and you know that you're generally going to receive X amount of XP for this particular adventure, or like now it's like certain number of like progress points or whatever it is. Right. But the hook is I'm gonna pull the handle on investing this much time in this thing. Let's see what magic items come out.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it.
So I think it does foster this kind of like magic items are really important.
Yeah.
Anyway,
but,
that's an aside.
Yeah, some people are more focused on it, and some people aren't. You get a variety of players depending on where you are.
All right, so you've read the synopsis. You know your NPCs, you know your rewards, you're looking at the encounters, what can I edit out if need be?
Sure, like what information is critical to the players? What do they need to know to move themselves forward? And how do I get that information out to the players?
Right.
Is it by an encounter? Is it by an NPC?
Do they find a map?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Let's see, and usually there's usually a development section in the adventures as well that kind of lets you know, okay, here's what the adventures are going to be going through as they go through the scenario. So that's something that's pretty good to look out for too.
I wrote an adventure, and one of the things that I tried to include was like little tips for like alternate ways to succeed or beat this encounter.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, yeah.
And so I think regardless of whether that's explicitly stated in the adventure, I think it's good to, number one, always be open to an alternative, inventive way for the party to beat an encounter.
Yeah, definitely.
And then number two, if you can think of some options that get you out of a combat or get you out of an investigation jam.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily a short, thing you're going to brainstorm as you're reading, but...
Yeah, but I mean, keeping yourself open to those details, it can definitely save you, because I mean, there have been games where I've gotten to like the 3-hour mark, and we've still got like maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours worth of gameplay that we need to do. And the players think of a particularly like clever solution to overcome something, and the next thing I know, okay, that's overcome my time problem because they've overcome this challenge. Now we can get to the real meat of things. I can really fill this last hour with what the thrust of the adventure is.
Yeah. I also think, since we're talking about pacing momentarily here, I also think it's okay to finish 15 or 20 minutes early.
Yeah,
more than
absolutely.
that. More than that, I think
Yeah.
you may be shortchanging the players. They may feel like, oh, well, we didn't really. Why did that wrap up so early? But 15 or 20 minutes, not any more than half an hour.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
If it's more than half an hour early, then they feel like I don't think we got everything. That wrapped up awful quick.
Yeah.
But players are not as long as you've come to a satisfactory ending,
Yeah, exactly.
then being 15 or 20 minutes early is great.
Yeah,
it gives as me as a player, it gives me time to like write down my rewards and make sure I've handed in my whatever sheet I've got.
Yeah, exactly.
And then like
walk off and get a drink or something
where am
like
I
that,
going
you know?
next? And what do I have to do?
Is there a coffee kiosk along the way?
I think particularly at a con, everybody is sort of pushing. Bisbee Care, thanks so much for subbing up the gift for Farquaad. Appreciate it. I think at a con, everybody's like pushing so hard that if they have an extra 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes, they're like, oh,
a little bit of breathing room.
Okay, like, because I don't know about you, but certainly when I'm at Gen Con, it was like, go. What's next? Where are we going next? Let's eat as fast as we can. Oh, there's a 25-minute wait in the line. And then we get there, and like, the food never comes as fast as you want. What happened?
And I mean, I know as a DM, like at cons, if things are just working out really well and the game ends a little bit early, that's a little bit of breathing room too. I get to clean up my maps. I get to pack up my stuff and not have to worry about rushing to get out while the next DM is like pushing back in.
Right.
So yeah.
All right. What other? If you got 15 minutes to an hour, is there anything else?
Okay. The big thing to look out for, for me personally, what I like to look out for in adventure is what I call the emphatic element.
Oh.
And so that's a term that I picked up like in my old theater days, but most authors will write like a particular shtick to their adventure, right?
Okay.
Most authors you don't necessarily just want to write something straightforward. You want to write something that has a little bit of your personality to it.
Right.
And so look into what the author is trying to do with the adventure.
Yeah.
Is the adventure okay? This is detective work. This is like a noir adventure. Everybody's investigating the details about this particular incident, and that's what hooks the players in. I gotta really spark their curiosity as to what's going on here, or maybe it's like there are rumors of a particular monster that's been stalking the town, and you build that up, and you build up the players so that when they finally encounter that monster, there's this big kind of sense of accomplishment, But yeah, pick out the detail, pick out the what's the shtick that makes the adventure like interesting to the players, that would make the adventure interesting to the players. In particular, what's the stick that makes it interesting to you as a DM? Because if you're interested in that adventure, you'll probably DM it in a way that's compelling to your players as well.
I know in I wrote an adventure called The Spirited Investigation, and the emphatic element in that is that you've infiltrated this masquerade ball, and you're trying to win a spot in a competition. And you do that by doing a series of other challenges, right?
Oh, sure,
And
yeah.
so you're trying to accrue points.
Yeah.
And so that's the emphatic element, is like, I've got a variety of different challenges, whether it's, if you've got a party that's like very much role-playing, you can go and do a role-playing type of challenge.
Sure.
If you got a party that's more like, dexterity, thief kind of guys, there's a challenge that you can do where you've got to like climb a tower and unlock some stuff or whatever it is. But that's the shtick, is like, that's a series of skill challenges. Now, if I was going to DM that, I would start, number one, the party's handed a menu of like, which ones do you want to do?
Sure.
But number two, I can also always just say, okay, well, after 2, the competition's over and you've accrued however many points you've accrued.
Yeah, exactly. So, and I mean that takes reading your players as well and figuring out, okay, is this shtick gonna land? Is this going to, is this what's going to be interesting to the players? And if you need to tweak that a little bit to kind of tune it to their tastes, that's something that you can definitely look out for as well as you're trying to prep this particular adventure. There's a lot of combat involved in Adventurers League games, and so sometimes it's a matter of like figuring out like, how am I going to push the players to finally get to this particular encounter, and from this encounter, how am I going to push them to get to the next one?
Yeah. So I agree. There's always in every one that I've read, whether this is a gauntlet of traps or whatever the particular, this is an overland travel kind of adventure. There's always, like you say, some sort of designer's like angle on.
Yeah.
This is what makes this adventure interesting and unique, and you want to try and find a way to highlight that element of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Engaging.
Yeah. Because that's what's going to make players want to go through the adventure. So, basically, I mean, what it all comes down to as far as prep goes, as far as like figuring out what all these elements are, is figuring out, again, what does the adventure have to motivate players? What tools do you as a DM have to motivate players? Like, your improvisational skills or your being compelling in combat, for example. And then 3, what, like looking at the party, what can you pull out of your players that's going to motivate themselves too? Can you have one player try to cooperate with another player? And can you have them interacting with one another, trying to figure something out? Is one player particularly attached to an NPC? Might they be able to motivate the other players to then help this NPC out? So yeah.
Do you have any tips left in your tip bag? I assume at some point you got to look at the maps, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and eventually you're going to get there. Usually, if I have a really tight crunch as far as prep goes, I'll have the maps alongside the module as I'm reading them. So as soon as I get to a particular section of the module and I see the map that's associated with it, I can kind of just, compare those and see, okay, what is this on the map? What is this in the adventure? Where is this described? So on and so forth. League adventures are pretty good at being easy to digest. There are some exceptions, of course, but usually it's really like the material is really well keyed to the maps and the monsters that you're given, so that it's easy to identify, okay, like this, here's the setting, what do the monsters do in that setting? So that's one way that you can kind of like look at the descriptions of the adventures as well.
At what point, you're slammed for time, you're down to your last 15 minutes, at what point do you look at the final kind of keystone encounter and kind of try and take that in, right? Because to me, that's always kind of, that's what you want to that's what you're aiming for. That's where the maximum challenge is presented and where generally like the maximum reward is attained.
Yeah. It depends. I mean, if I've got 10 minutes to prep, I'll spend maybe about half the time looking at that last section, because the last section will also key you in on what it'll oftentimes key you in on what needs to happen in the sections before. They'll have to have found this item, or they'll have to have spoken with this person. Like the opening paragraph, like very frequently the opening paragraph of like the last chapter of an adventure is, now that the characters have spoken and gotten this information from this NPC, they can push forward. They can find this particular opening to this dungeon and go after this particular item. Well, you've just been told by that last section, what the characters need to accomplish and what they're looking for. So I'll usually skim like, I'll take like half the time to skim like the first few chapters and try to get as much of a sense of what I can, what the adventure is. And then I'll spend the half of the time, like, again, looking at that final chapter, making sure I know exactly like how everything resolves. So, if I have time, I'll look at the monsters, like monster stat blocks, figure out, okay, this monster has this particular shtick. Again, it's the same thing. Each monster usually has like an emphatic element that you can key in on to make an encounter interesting.
Right.
So,
well, and I will also try to pick out anything that the author has decided to make non-standard in the stat blocks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sometimes it'll be something like, they're fire giants, but they also have a infernal attack that when they hit, they can do necrotic damage.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Exactly.
That's when I'll be like, whoa, wait a minute, what's this? Where does this come in?
Yeah,
That sort of
precisely.
stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Stat blocks can cue you in as to what the shtick of the adventure is.
Usually that stuff is also specifically called out, right? So if I go through if I just see fire giant, Odiug, whatever. I don't pay too much attention to that.
Yeah.
I will kind of maybe focus on that when it comes up, assuming we encounter that thing.
Sure.
It's when they say, note that, this is a fire giant with this particular ability replaced.
Yeah, exactly.
So.
Or, like there are certain specific circumstances that are happening around this particular monster, Yeah.
All right. Do you have any is that your
That's the bulk of it. So I mean, just keep an eye out for those particular things if you've got a short, if you've got like half an hour, 10 minutes to prepare an adventure. Just keep an eye out for those specific things. Like, okay, so read the outline, know who the NPCs are and what they're doing and what they do to motivate the adventures, what information they give out, find the rewards, and then find out what you want. And I mean, the thing about rewards too, it's not just the magic item; it's that critical potion of greater healing that might save a party if if they've used so much of their resources, and they've only got a short rest,
Right.
to kind of get themselves back up before they have to encounter the big bad, and figure out again, like, sort of what is that sort of special thing that the adventure's trying to do? What's the unique thing that adventure's trying to do?
Focus on that.
Yeah. Yep.
All right, that all sounds very reasonable. All right, well, that's terrific. We've come to the momentous part of the show where we are going to do the DM's Kit Duel, as I have so flamboyantly named it. But what we're going to do here is Jay has brought the kit that he uses for DM and con games. I have brought the kit that I use, not for DM and con games, but for DMing here at Saving Throw. So it's maybe a little bit overpacked in that respect.
Okay.
That's my disclaimer ahead of time. That's my excuse for losing. So we're just gonna go through and compare, like, what's in your DM bag and what do I have in mine, and talk a little bit about why we packed what we packed, and just have a look-see.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Well, I thought we'd do it sort of at the same time.
Oh, all right, sure.
Actually,
sure.
the way I was picturing this, and I'm not sure where these things are going to live, so I'm just going to move them around. The way I was picturing this is you would reveal something from your bag, and I would see if I have the same thing in mine.
Oh, all right, sure. Okay. So first of all, I've got the bag of holding from Think Geek. I love this thing.
All right. Okay. Mine is a Tenba camera bag.
Okay.
That I have taken.
I've
taken
awesome.
the padding out, so the camera padding is typically removable.
Sure.
And so.
But it's great because it stands up, right? You can kind of just.
It sits
pop
square
it
like
in.
this.
Yeah,
I haven't done
yeah.
anything to it. I don't know. We got a couple different possible camera angles. The other thing that I like about this, which you may not like, is that the top zips open, right? So,
Oh, sure,
so
yeah.
rather than having to open the flap, you
Yeah.
could just open this thing and reach and get
just
whatever
kinda
you
pull
want.
everything out. Sure.
Now,
Okay.
if you're fussy, that's a security risk, right? Like if somebody wants to steal something from you, they can zip this open. This camera bag was actually fairly cheap if you follow like Adorama or B&H Photo. They generally have sales, on a weekly basis of something, but camera bags come around. So anyway, that's what I've got. You get the bag of holding. I've got this Tenba messenger bag.
Oh,
all right. Okay.
So let's see.
Do you have dog treats in your DM's kit?
No, dog treats I don't.
That's an essential here at Saving Throw
Sure.
Show, and so I'm very disappointed, Jay, that you do not think of our four-legged friends
No, this
when you
is
DM.
very true. Because they're like.
Why do you hate the animals, Jay?
They
You
just
probably eat red meat too, don't you?
Yeah. They're not very good at role playing.
All right.
I don't know. They're great at rolling dice.
That's not true.
Okay, so speaking of which, that's the first thing I'm gonna pull out.
All right.
My dice.
Yeah. Ooh, nice.
And I have a number of sets. Just as a DM, I find that I like being able to roll a lot of attacks at the same time. So.
We have a camera over here, right?
Sure. Let's see.
Where is it
that
pointed?
one? There
Is it in here?
is.
Is it living?
Towards the center.
It's towards where your hand is. Yeah. So.
Looks like you have a tiny little hand, Tom.
I do have a tiny little hand.
So I have about 5 sets of dice here.
Are these your loner dice or are
No,
these your dice?
those are mine.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I touched
No,
them.
don't worry. It's okay. I don't care. But I mean, I have a ton of D20s because as a DM, when you're at a con and somebody's rolling, multi-attack with advantage, I have various dice that I can use. So I can match up these two for one attack. I can match up these 2 purple ones for one attack and these 2 blue ones for one attack. I just rolled 3 attacks right there.
Right. Nice.
And I've got more than that.
I like
too,
the idea
so.
that they're color coded as a DM too. I think that's a great tip.
Yeah, it's handy. It's definitely handy. So okay, let's start with that.
I will say that's one of my pet peeves as a DM is a player who shows up with dice that they themselves can't read because they're so fancy.
Oh, sure,
that
yeah.
they can't read what they are.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a requirement for me. I need to be able to read numbers pretty quickly.
So you have a nice dice bag, nice D&D logo dice bag. My dice bag is a pencil case.
Ooh.
Is that on? I don't have, the chair is blocking my view.
Yeah, no, it's right there. I can see it. You're good.
So this is something that I started, that I changed to here recently. So, as you can probably see, first of all, I keep like the
you've got your
table
tents.
tents in here, but I know what my party is, right? So I don't have to put those. I keep a pen in here. I have a couple different sets. So these are my gravity dice. No, some are gravity dice.
Oh, nice.
These are, I don't remember where I got them, but they're aluminum, right?
Yeah.
So
those
I really
are-
like
those are pretty
these.
sweet.
I've actually started to just make all of my monster stats some version of D6s.
Oh, sure,
because
yeah.
I like to roll those. I just want to have those dice out.
Sure.
So that's kind of my main set. But then I also have a big set of various, like
Yeah.
you, I have a bunch of D20s and whatnot. I also have some weird dice in here, right? So these D6s, I'll just wrangle. These D6s are actually D3s.
Oh, gotcha.
They
Okay.
don't ever do a D6.
Yeah, sure.
That's a nice trick. So likewise, these D8s are D4s.
oh, they're D4s. Yeah.
So that's a fun trick.
Yeah. I've seen like D12s that are D4s that only roll 1 through 4. Those
I have some
too.
D12s that are D6s. They're really cool.
yeah.
They're really great. All right, so those are my dice.
And the nice thing about that bag too is it stands up. So again, you can kind of just have it standing up like right next to where you're running, and you can kind of just fish things out as you
Yeah.
move. So.
The other great thing about it is if we look here, it's got pockets. So I have these little condition tokens, right?
Oh, yeah,
That came out. I have the Compass Rose, the Devon Rue Compass Rose from
Sure.
Campaign Coins. Speaking of Campaign Coins, I use these 13th Age
Oh,
metal
nice.
tokens. I
These are
use
like
those.
the icons tokens.
Yeah. They're 13th Age Icons tokens, and I use them for tracking inspiration. Right.
That's cool.
So I will also use other campaign coins. So I have some little hearts tokens if I want to use them for something else, etc. Right.
Sure.
So that's kind of I've got all of this stuff. The nice thing about this is I've got all my dice. I've got a writing utensil.
Yeah.
I've got my table tents. I've got my little tokens and etc.
Yeah, like all in
and
one.
it's all in one spot.
in one
so
bag,
I
yeah.
don't have to go fish in my bag for 3 different things. Where did I put my pens? Where did I put my
Sure.
tokens? Where did I put? It's all in there, and I've got it divided out into these little pockets, right?
Murder weapon base bag.
Yeah.
And the nice thing about those heart tokens too is that they fit 1 in scale map.
Yeah.
So you could very well use them as something on like the grid as well.
Right.
Something representational as well.
Yeah, I meant to bring those things and I didn't. So that's my new dice bag is a pencil bag.
Yeah, very cool.
And we're kind of having like kiddingly a duel here, but
Sure.
it's whatever system works for you.
Yeah.
Right? It is not about like this is the right way to DM and this
Yeah.
is the wrong way to DM.
But this is a really nice compact kit to bring to a con, actually. I mean, with
Yeah.
cons, you don't usually have a whole lot of space. And that's why I try to keep everything that I need in this bag. Something that fits the size of a backpack, is really handy. Anything larger than that, and it can kind of get unwieldy. It can start getting in the way of people's, walkways and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's especially important to keep track of. The other thing for me, this is my kit for DMing on stream.
Sure.
I don't want to spend a lot of time rummaging around in my
Yeah.
bag because that's dead time on camera.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Which is a weird consideration, but
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's dead time in play too. So
Yeah.
you would get that at a home game. You'd get that at a con game. You'd get that at a store game.
what else have you got?
Okay, let's see. One thing that I like to have is this thing here. I found this at a GH Bass and Company. They actually make these for gamers now, but it's a little caddy that just snaps together,
Yep.
and it acts as a dice tray. So this is my loaner set.
Are we?
Oh yeah, thank you very much. So I slap that down usually behind my DM screen, so my dice don't go rolling off. When I need to roll, I can just toss everything in there. It's enough to roll all the attacks that I need usually. And again, I don't worry about, if I'm rolling multiple dice, I don't worry about them clattering onto the floor and having to pick them up or anything like that.
I have one of those.
Sure.
But for one thing, we have this dice pit here,
Yeah,
right?
you've got the nice surface
My
there,
dice don't get
okay.
away from me here at Saving Throw Show. I have a really nice one from Campaign Coins that's at home. I don't think we have one here.
Well,
So I don't have that.
Sure, the nice thing about
the one that
these
I have is a
things-
little bit bigger, right?
Yeah, but it's the same thing. It snaps, right? Yeah. The nice thing
exactly.
is it unfolds, flat. It's easy to bring around.
Yeah.
I played a game at an airplane once. I wouldn't have been able to play if it weren't for this thing. So,
Yeah, right?
like 30,000 feet, you're rolling dice. You just pass this around. You can pass this around to players at your table. It's really handy. Let's see. Okay, what else have you got? I've got quite a few things. Do you want me to?
What else have I got? Well, let's see what you've got, because I have a couple different little tokens, right?
Oh, sure. Okay.
So now these are just game board components.
Sure.
That are little peoples, right?
Yeah.
So if I want
plastic
to, yeah, they're just little plastic meeples in there. So if I want to have a fight where there's 5 orcs or whatever, I can kind of separate them by color. They're not very heavy. They don't take up a ton of room, and yet they have some presence on the table. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Over here, I have these are just little power cubes. Again, they're just game board components that you can get online, and I don't use them very often. I don't know why they're in my bag.
Well, you never know.
I have yet to use these at Saving Throw Show. I have yet to use these.
Okay.
But again, we're in the studio. I can just go over to the counter and go, or to the drawer and go, okay, I need three goblins. Actually, I don't ever do that. I go, Dom, I need some skeletons. Go, can you bring me?
And then they just kind of
magically appear.
Magically, yeah.
Magically appear. Do you have any tokens, or what do you use for if you're going to have a little combat with
Yeah, I do.
nobodies? Oh, look at this.
I mean, I actually have because I play D&D. It's pretty predictable what you need.
Yeah.
At the very least, there's certain things that come up pretty frequently. So, let's see where okay, we're right here. So let's do that. So I have just a little tub that has I've got a variety of tokens in there. I've got stuff that I can.
Now we switched.
Oh, sure. I've got tokens that are more player focused, stuff that I can let other players borrow if they need to represent their own character. I have.
Now, what are these? Are these look like Pathfinder?
Yeah, they're a
BattleBox
mixture. Yeah, they're a mixture of Pathfinder and D&D figures. That one in particular is from the Magic the Gathering board game, or one of the Magic the Gathering board games. I have. I still have like my old copies of games like Hero Quest and like Dragon Strike, and what those came with are these sort of generic, like, monochromatic figures. So there's a wizard that's in blue, a fighter that's in blue, a rogue that's in blue, there's a wizard that's in purple. So I'll usually use these for mooks and NPCs. And sometimes if a player says, okay, well, I want a barbarian with a sword, well, there you go, they can use these as well.
Right.
But they're just little generic tokens that I can use to kind of represent minor players or again,
I love
NPCs
those as
and
like
such.
faceless monsters. Those are terrific.
Yeah, they make things easy.
Everybody needs to pay attention. Jay is a consummate professional con DM because he has put his little sigil on the bottom of every single one.
Yeah,
So they don't go,
a lot of them at least have these. These do have a tendency to walk. For small or like medium creatures, I found I DM at cons so much that it's hard to be mini accurate, to have the actual mini representing things.
Right.
So I just have these gremlins that I use for medium characters, for like medium monsters.
Where did they come from?
They're from the same folks that make the D&D figures. I just found this set at a store, and I'm like, you know what? These are great. I'm going to use these. And then they also make these Godzilla miniatures. So I use gremlins
those are
for
terrific.
Godzilla's for larges, and okay, this Godzilla is a roper. This Godzilla is an ogre. And I have these little ETs that I also like to use. So they're not necessarily mini accurate, but at the same time they're just more interesting. Okay, you're fighting the one that has the you're fighting ET with his hands down. That one's a bugbear. You're fighting the ET with his hands up. That's so on and so forth. And And it just kind of keeps players engaged. I've found.
One of the things that I stole a bunch of minis from was, like, I went to like a KB Toy and Hobby.
Oh,
where they
sure,
liquidate
yeah.
everything. I bought a Transformers chess set.
Huh, that's
from the movie,
cool.
like the Transformers movie.
Yeah.
And it's all of these robots that are just on like a little half-inch
sure. So they're about the right size for
and it's like you run into the same problem like, well, I attack Optimus Prime.
Sure,
It's like,
exactly.
Okay, well, that's not actually Optimus Prime, but okay,
Sure.
that's fine.
But no. I just use sort of these generic figures. I have a few that are like kind of specific. Like I have a dead body. Sometimes those are nice to spread out. And I have a few like animal figures that I use to kind of represent, either animals that are being fought against or like people's like animal companions and things like that. But yeah, I just have a small selection of minis here that I use to, put out on the grid whenever I need to, and it's usually enough. It's usually just enough to kind of get everybody engaged in the scene and like give everybody an idea of where things are, what's going on.
So I don't have specials, but I got
the
these
zombies
at
and
Gen Con
yeah,
a long time ago. And there's
those are great.
like 2 dozen in there, and I keep them in these little plastic containers.
Sure.
They're just the cheapest little thing. It was like $5 for like 20 of them, and I couldn't, like, I should have bought more because the company, of course, went out of business.
Of course.
Fortress Figures is what it's called. But I never painted them. I didn't need to because, like, the zombies look like zombies, and I don't really need any more detail.
Yeah.
And they're just for mooks and minions.
Yeah.
Right.
And your eye snaps to the color.
Yeah.
I found so.
Yeah. And so then I just took a fine point Sharpie, ultra fine point Sharpie, and wrote a different number, just numbered them 1 to 24.
Oh, sure, there you go. That's cool.
And that way, if I need to, I can say, like, which one are you attacking? Are you attacking 4 or are you attacking 19? I'm attacking number 19. Okay, great. If I really want to track down to that kind of level, what the hit points are. And I've got 4 different kinds here, right? So I've also got skeleton guys, and, here. So those are those guys. We did have a little disco zombie. I'm sure
that'll happen.
I bet if I had a little super glue, I could just reattach that, no problem. But then these guys are what I tend to use for lieutenants and bosses, right? So the goblins are the minions and mooks, and then these guys I tend to use as boss guys unless I have like an entire skeleton crew attacking or whatever. But these guys make it great. Like I'm the the wizard master or whatever, and these guys are terrific. Like cultists, lieutenants, captain of the guard,
yeah, sure,
that sort of thing. And I've done the same thing where I've numbered them all 1 to 12, right? And every time I get them out, somebody says, "What are those miniatures? Where can I get them?" And I always have to tell them I got them years ago at Gen Con for a song, and now you'll never get them again.
Yeah.
But that's rather than I like the idea that you have yours differentiated by size. Mine sort of like are by color and sculpt, right? Which again, they've held up pretty well for as old as they are. I want to say they're at least 15 years old.
Sure.
I could be wrong. So I've lost. Oh boy, 3 of them are decapitated.
That's okay.
But these guys, honestly,
that makes sense. So.
Yeah, I don't use that much.
Sure.
These guys are as boss monsters. I really only need 3 of them.
Yeah. Well, it's cool because then you can have 1 of that guy, 3 of these guys, and then like 5, and the character, like the players rather, can like take a look at that and like assess. Okay, this is the big guy right there.
Yeah. This is a great. It's very evocative when you do exactly what you're talking about, right? Yeah. Like. The players, you just put this on the table. I call these guys disco zombies because it looks like they're doing a weird disco dance. But you put these guys on the table and they know, okay, these guys are the chum, these are the lieutenants, that's the boss guy.
Yep.
So they travel really well, and these 2 little Vutainer, things don't take up a lot of room. They put them in the side pocket, and that's that. What else you got? Okay. What else you got?
So let's see what else.
Who's winning so far, chat? Who's winning? Who's got the Who's got the best DMs kit? I feel like it's pretty close so far, to be honest.
Pretty tight.
Chad is wondering why you never use any of these things in Iron Keep.
Oh yeah, well that's because I don't like you. I don't like any of my players in Iron Keep, so I don't get this stuff out. I do use a lot of this stuff, and these things I don't. You know, part of it is I like to. For Iron Keep, I like to be more evocative than just use my
just be more descriptive and narrative about.
Or I'm going to try and use a special miniature.
Sure, yeah, there you go.
Sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I will say is that I do a lot of theater of the mind in Iron Keep, which I can get away with more than I can necessarily. In our weekly D&D game, I have tried to keep combats to 3 rounds or less.
Sure. Yeah.
Which is tricky, and also like keep things moving by describing things rather than stopping, drawing stuff out.
Sure.
Speaking of which, what do you do when you have to stop and draw something out?
Well, when you stop and draw something out, I have a complement of mats that I use. So I have the D&D Adventures grid, and I also have a bunch of flip mats. And I carry this many because sometimes you just don't have time between slots to erase a map and redraw something. So it helps me a lot as a DM to just be able to sketch something out. You know, sometimes I'll just use this as a writing surface.
As a whiteboard,
you don't even need it for to do a map or anything like that. But I've got that. I've got hold on, where is it? There we go. I've got my my complement of markers and stuff.
Don't hold out on us.
So, well, no, I mean, it's just a bunch of different colored dry erase markers. So sometimes if you meet an NPC, I'll just kind of like write down, NPC1, or I'll write down, okay, you're in Waterdeep, so you'll just give up, I'll just use it as a surface, and then I'll sketch if they're in a room, I'll just sketch out. Whatever location they happen to be in. You've got a door here, there's a window here that's been busted open, and there's a desk here that is just toppled with papers lying all around. Really handy. But again, sometimes between slots, if I'm like rushing from one game to another, I won't have time to clean that up. So this way, at least I have a few to kind of fall back on. I find that I'll use at least maybe 2 per game session, and I have enough that I can not worry about that. Let's see. I have a lot of loaner pencils, as you can see.
So you just stick to the 4 basic colors. You don't get any fancier than that.
Yeah.
You don't really have a ton of like different size markers, right? It's like a small one and then the 4 big ones.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I found that for most games, I don't really want to spend too much time. I want to be able to draw the map and like explain it to the players and show them where these things are. But I don't want to have to like, okay, this red is one thing, this blue is like the water or anything like that. You don't necessarily need to get that detailed.
What are these?
These are inspiration cards that I had printed out, actually. And so I found that a lot of DMs, like a lot of DMs that I played with, sure. I found that a lot of DMs that I played with don't use inspiration, or they forget to dole it out.
Oh, yeah.
So for me, it's really important to have something in front of me. So I usually will just have that leaning up against my DM screen, and if I can, I'll just dole out the amount of inspiration for the number of players on the table. That way, I can see easily, okay, 2 people haven't gotten it. How am I going to get those 2 people to get inspiration?
Right.
You know what I mean? And I can encourage them how to do that.
What I really like about these cards are, if you're a newbie, it says on the card what inspiration is, what it does.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's not uncommon for someone to go, oh, what's inspiration? Because they may not know what the mechanic is, or they may be playing with a DM who forgets to dole it out.
Who doesn't really dole it out.
And I think in Adventures League especially, it's good to be generous with it. Like everybody should get it at least once.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not game breaking. And then the thing that always drove me nuts when I was running, I ran a full hardcover adventure for my table. They would get it and then they would sit on it, and I'd be like, Listen, I can't give you more inspiration if you don't spend your inspiration. I'm like, it's not, it's not gold.
Yeah.
Like, don't just like squat on it.
No, precisely. And I make sure to point that out to players too. If they do something that, that's, great in character or just makes the entire table laugh, I'll say, you know what? If you didn't already have a point of inspiration, I'd award you with another.
Giving it to you again.
And it's a fun little acknowledgement, but it's also a reminder, hey, wait a minute, I really should spend this thing.
What do I have? I showed you those coins for inspiration.
Yeah.
That's generally what I use. We do have campaign coins that campaign coins is donated to us, and I love these D20 tokens that they have. They have
those are nice.
They have a 20 on one side and they have a 1 on the other, and I really I love those. They have fate points and other stuff too, which is terrific. But we use these every game, and I love those. I also have a original flip mat.
Oh, nice. Huh.
That I use.
Oh, wow.
So this is the original Steel Squire one. It's an old one, and it has squares on one side, and hexes on the
hexes
other.
on the other. Those are cool.
I'll do the same thing. I have a separate pencil bag.
For your dry erase
It
stuff?
has my dry erase markers in it.
Now that makes sense.
I don't have a huge assortment either, but I do like to have different sizes. I like this kind of like fine kind of quartet size. I also like some of these bigger kind of like, I don't know, gas tank like paintbrush type of thing.
Sure.
I like to have blue for drawing water and whatnot. I don't like using red on mine. Red and green are problematic colors for erasing.
Yeah.
But blue and black
they'll stain.
Generally pretty good.
Yeah.
So I have another pencil case that I keep those.
Sure. Well, yeah, no, the nice thing is you don't accidentally take your Sharpie and write on your mat and be like, oh, I can erase that. Which has happened to me.
Yeah,
I'll admit
although I will tell you a great trick. I don't know if you ever have a problem with either writing with a Sharpie or writing with having old dry erase on there.
Yeah.
So you can do two things. One, you can take a fresh marker and go over it.
Oh, sure,
and
okay.
Scrub up a big area that gets dirty, and then kind of like work it a little bit with a Kleenex, and that film of the new stuff mixing with the old stuff will give you just enough friction to pull it up. But the other trick, which is very simple, is to just use some toothpaste.
Oh, okay, all right. And that doesn't affect the
as long as you don't
surface?
use the super gritty stuff.
Sure.
You
Okay,
just
good to
gently
know.
like you get a little wet, you use some toothpaste, and again that gives you a little bit of I wouldn't do it all the
Nice.
time, but if you have a real problem area, and
Sure.
I had that recently. That's that.
awesome. Tip of the day.
Is that the
For
tip
DMs
of the
running
day?
it, well, tip of the day for me.
Lysol wipes, says Castles and Chemo. Lysol wipes. Yeah, sometimes too a little glass cleaner. I don't know. I'm always
okay.
questionable about spraying chemicals onto my mats.
on like the plastic mat.
What else have you got?
Okay, I'm almost there.
Come on
let's
now.
See, I've got
Index cards.
Okay, actually, I don't use index cards.
Get out of my. This is my stream. You're officially fired from my stream. Everybody, rewind, delete everything that Jay said. Jay is a terrible DM, and no one should listen to Jay.
What I do use is this handy dandy combat tracker
Oh,
page.
son of a buck.
Which I composed that I don't know when the Adventurers League started. But it's got spots for like your monster list, AC, notes. Hit points go into this box right here, and you can track hit points there. You can use that side as either the right hand column as either like for tracking initiative order or for tracking rounds or for both of it. I find that it's just a handy little thing to keep combat like flowing quickly and easily.
Do I have one with me is the question. I have one in my other DM bag. I have
Sure.
something exactly like this, but I had it laminated.
Ah, gotcha. So you can just reuse it.
Yeah, the problem with laminating it is that, well, and here's another dirty trick. Is you can take
Sure, yeah, like a page protector.
Page protector. This is a classic. This is a classic Adventurers League trick, right? You've got one, right?
Well, yeah, not quite a page protector, but I have a character folio, and my character sheets are all in these like sort of page protectors things, so I can just use dry erase to track whatever I need to on them. So.
Welcome to Nerd Time.
I know, yeah.
I'm here with Nerd and Nerd. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the classic like Adventurers League hacks that I've seen people do is like they'll take their character sheet and they'll put it inside a page protector and then they'll use dry erase on it or wet erase.
Yeah, and you just kind of wipe everything off afterwards.
I really like this. I like having something like this. I'm not. What I like about this is you can fill it in as you go.
Yeah.
The one that I have is more for kind of pre-planning your encounters.
Sure.
Or whatever, and I don't do that.
Yeah.
I don't pre-plan that like that far in advance to like fill it out ahead of time.
Sure. Right? Well, that's the thing about running Adventurers League games is usually the encounters are there for you. They're kind of outlined for you.
Yeah.
So you've got some leeway to make changes as you need to, but overall, it's kind of a nice, quick built stuff that you can just jot down on a sheet like that. What
have you got in your character folios here?
My character
your own personal characters, or do you have other DM stuff in there?
Well, I have this white book here. This is my DM folio. So in addition to that that tracking sheet, I've got my DM tent with my name and my DCI number.
Mm-hmm.
I've got
everybody can impersonate Jay now. Take a screenshot.
Yeah, just take the DCI number.
Yep, there you go.
Let's see. Yeah, this is as good as my social security number in D&D circles. Let's see. I've got pockets for whatever adventures I'm running. So right now I've got 2 adventures in here, and if I've got like special map sheets that I need for for an adventure that I'm running, I can slip those in there as well. I usually keep a stash of pre-gens in one of the pockets so that if I've got new players coming to my table, I can just hand them, I can say, hey, I've got a fighter, I've got a warlock, what kind of character do you like to play? Hand them a pre-gen, we can get rolling, get them started right at the table and get playing D&D. And then this last one is just for whatever random things I have. I've got like the Wild Magic Surge table printed out, and I've got Madness guidelines and, Adventurers League, like the current player's guide and stuff like that. And just a couple of, various certificates that I've earned along the way that I may or may not use. But yeah, that's my DM folder. And then I have my player folder, which contains all of my characters. And it's to say, I just found this book at Barnes & Noble. I slapped a D&D sticker on it.
No.
And it's just, it's got, like printouts of my characters. I have like a template that I've created for my character sheets that I use for my major ones. And then I've got some like, smaller players that I just have regular character sheets for that I can just pick up and use whenever. But it's the same thing. I mean, this holds all of the materials that I need to run my characters. I can just write on dry erase on the paper here, and then, I can track spell slots and I can track hit points on it. I don't have to worry about burning pieces of paper or anything like that. And it's just handy. These 2 just kind of fit in the back of my bag real easy.
Nice. I have all of my stuff in 2 places. I have it I have just this, pocket insert folder for a 3-ring binder.
Nice.
So I have that, and then the other place that I have all this stuff is in my
of
iPad.
course your tablet. Yeah.
So so I keep a lot of stats and notes and whatnot in my iPad. Although I go back and forth because I will often prep on my home computer on like Google Docs.
Sure.
And then print that off and put it in my pocket protector folder. I haven't found a great way that I'm happy with to share it between my iPad and my computer in a way in a way that I want to indulge in it, right? Like mostly the iPad is for monster stats.
Sure, yeah.
And then my sheet of notes, my hard copy sheet of notes. The nice thing I like about having a hard copy sheet of notes is I can add notes to it very easily and very quickly and very directly without having to connect to Wi-Fi, open up the document.
And make sure that gets saved and not get lost or anything like that.
Right.
No, I know exactly what you mean.
So other miscellaneous things that I have in my bag, I have, what's really important here? So Post-its and index cards is something that obviously I mentioned.
Sure.
What is this? Oh, I guess I do have some like random minis, all right? Those were in my dice bag.
Yeah, sure. You never know when you're going to use them, so.
I really like these. You can see that I've used these before, but I've got 4 different packs of Pathfinder face cards.
Yeah.
And I know they're, sometimes designed for explicit adventures, although these are dungeon dwellers and these are just Pathfinder Society people, whatever. I think they're great for helping people keep track of like who an NPC is, who's in this room, especially if you have more than one NPC that they're talking to. Like putting those face cards out is a really terrific.
Just having that visual reference to kind of keep things, things at the forefront of their mind. Yeah, absolutely.
And then the last thing is, obviously, I have a selection of a couple different writing implements, and I like to have. I find a ruler is really handy to have, not necessarily at the table so much, but like when I'm making notes about something or whatever, I like to have a little ruler. So I have a variety of pencils and pens, different colors. This is a pretty basic assortment, but I like to have a big meaty pen that'll put a lot of ink on the page, because when I'm writing, I want to be able to. Especially when I'm writing on a pre-printed adventure, I want whatever I've written to stick out. Like, oh yeah, I made a note here. Why? That's the main tour of what's in my DM's kit. It seems pretty comparable.
Yeah.
I don't have quite as many flip mats as you do, but I don't run as much grid combat as you do.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Like,
so I mean, obviously, it all really depends on what you need and what games you're running. Like, if I were going to a convention where I was running Fate, I probably wouldn't have all of this stuff. I'd probably have something a little smaller.
You'd have index cards, is what you
I would
have.
have index cards. I would. Yeah. The last thing that I have in my bag that I think it's just my DM screen.
I hate to say it.
Gotta have that.
I don't have a DM screen.
Not every DM runs
in
with
my
it.
bag.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, it's a matter of personal preference. Some DMs just like playing out in the open. I like having a little place where I can, tuck away my initiative tracker, the copy of the adventure, just because it's like so out there all the time.
I will say I've got a set of blank playing cards, and that's what I love to use to make table tents. Right?
Oh,
like
sure,
index cards
yeah.
are great, but there's something about they're a little bit glossy and they bend just a little bit differently.
Yeah.
That using blank playing cards is a nice touch to differentiate it from everything else that's going on. Yeah, I used to have a DM screen, but here on stream, setting that up takes a lot of space.
Yeah.
And it's kind of unnecessary.
Right.
Yeah. I don't. When I'm running here on stream, I have basically maybe 1 or 2 pages of notes. About what the events of that evening session are going to be about.
Yeah.
So unlike an Adventurers League thing, I don't have 20 pages that I'm flipping through,
Right,
of extensive descriptions and stuff like that. Yeah. It's a lot of very rough notes of this is a forest clearing that has these 3 features, and and because it's my game that I'm running for myself and for my group, I don't have to worry about whether I'm fabricating details or communicating everything properly. Right. I have to worry about whether I'm communicating everything properly, but I don't have to make that transition from what's in my brain to what's in your brain.
Yeah, right, right.
It's all up here.
Yeah. Well, and you get to respond to your characters in different ways, and kind of like, you have your world sort of laid out in your head.
Right.
And you know how that world's going to react to whatever they're going to happen to do.
I think my basic point is I don't have as much information that I need to quote unquote hide from my players.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the thing about Adventures League games, they have there are certain story beats that that you'll be hitting, sort of very specific bits of information that you're going to be revealing to your players. And so, your adventure is really a guide as to where the thrust of the story is going to take place and how it's sort of going to play out, what possibilities there can be. And so, I just find it's easier for me to have a DM screen where I've got all of my stuff. It also makes it so that it sort of just gives me a little bit of space, a little bit of breathing room that I know I can use if I need to lay out a few things.
That is.
And in a con, space can be
that's one of my pet peeves is when a player sits down at the table and kind of like sprawls
Yeah,
all of their
yeah.
stuff out.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm very much into like, let's all have kind of like an equal amount of space.
Yeah,
Whatever
yeah.
it is. Like,
I mean,
don't- you don't
it
need your
depends.
notebook and your character sheet and your laptop.
Yeah, and your dice like just kind of scattered
And then
all
your
over.
giant
Yeah.
64th, ounce mug of whatever you're drinking.
And then your dice tower with the big tray.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's fine to have any of those things, but keep a footprint for what's important.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And I always feel like as the DM, I'm entitled to a little bit more space than everyone else.
Sure. Yeah.
Because I
Definitely think
generally
about it
have
that way.
like I have a notebook that's wide open.
Sure.
And then I have another thing over here that it's either where I'm rolling dice, where
Yeah,
I'm keeping
exactly.
notes, where I have a tablet open or whatever it is.
Like you've got handouts over there or something.
I just
like that.
need
Yeah.
half again as much as you think you need.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like for me, I usually have like the body of the adventure on one side, and then like monsters and maps and my initiative tracker on the other side, and then I've got like my little area for my dice and wherever I stash my initiative count, my inspiration, cards and stuff like that. So,
Right.
Yeah.
Whew.
All right.
2.5 hours of drinking from the fire hose right
Yeah,
there.
seriously, right.
Hopefully that fountain of wisdom has been useful for you. If it has not been, if your thirst for knowledge has not been appropriately slaked, which it's a never-ending discussion. How could it be?
Yeah.
You can join us over on Discord. We have a Discord channel where you can specifically go to DisOrganized Play and talk about like, oh, hey, I saw this in the show, or I have a question about my game, or how did this work, or whatever it is. So you can come and check that out. You can find Jay on Twitter at JAfrica.
Mm-hmm.
It's that simple. You can ask Jay a question there. You can let Jay know if you play his adventure, The Gate to the Unknown. You can let him know how that went if you play it at Gen Con or otherwise. You can find me. All my role-playing stuff is at Dungeon Bastard, so you can track me down there. It's all right there in the chat for you. So yeah, do you have any parting words of wisdom that you would like to share with? I will say, congratulations and thank you for deciding to run a con event. These cons couldn't. It's kind of a thankless job in terms of the con could not happen if there weren't people who were willing to DM, and DMing for a group of strangers can be. It can be intimidating,
Yeah.
it can be frustrating, it can be great. Like,
Yeah.
oh man, when you meet some amazing players,
Yeah.
it is the most wonderfully transcendent moment.
Absolutely.
It's really what you're hoping for. So good for you for taking that chance, because it's a lot easier to just be the player and ride along
It is.
and show up and like, well, let's see what they got,
Yeah.
and what the DM's gonna do for us, which is not a great attitude, but it is kind of the safer choice, right?
Well, it is, and I mean, as a DM, it's also a lot easier to kind of just be in your home game and be in this really kind of comfortable situation where you have total control over everything. You asked about sort of parting words of wisdom.
Yeah.
If you have not DM'd a public game or a con game, I would highly recommend it. Give it a try. I mean, either if you don't want to DM like a big setting like a con, just go to your local game store and offer to DM a game for them. It doesn't have to be anything long lasting, but you do learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about like your DMing style by DMing for people that you don't necessarily know.
Right. And I don't know, what it's like on your end of the camera, but I know our local game shops, you'd walk into any one of them, at least if they're Modern Chow, thanks for the bits. You could walk into any of them and say, I want to run a one-shot. Can you get me some players? This is the day or whatever. Or work it out with them when the day would be. And they will set it up for you, like no question, right?
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes you can get like sometimes places will like let you use the adventure from their adventure library. They'll say, okay, yeah, we've got a table that kind of wants to run this particular scenario. Why don't you take a look at it and
Or also just go on dmsguild.com and
Sure,
find
yeah.
an Adventurers
Yeah.
League, like an AL module that you think looks interesting.
Sure, yeah.
And download it and do your prep on it and bring it in and they'll find somebody of the appropriate tier. They'll either say, okay, we're going to make up new characters. The great thing about being into tabletop role-playing games right now is there's no shortage of people who want to learn how to play.
Absolutely.
It's a great time to bring more people into the hobby and to expand your own skill set. So, don't be too intimidated by it. I think sometimes the disadvantage to running this show is I come at this from a particular perspective and a particular amount of experience, and everybody watches me DM on Wednesday nights and sees like what the show is and da 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 da, and you don't have to be, you won't be whatever I am, and you won't be whatever DMJ is. You can certainly steal our tricks, whatever it is, but it's about finding what your own...
exactly. What sort of what your strengths are, what draws you to the game. Because again, what you find, if you DM what you like, your players will see it.
Whenever somebody says like, well, why would you DM? Like, it's easier to play. And my answer is always, because if I come up with a cool idea, I don't have to run it by somebody else. And I don't have to roll the dice to make that thing happen. Whether that's, I have this goofy voice that I want to do. Or it's, I want to describe this fantastic city that's built out of melting wax, continually melting wax or whatever. Like, I just get to describe that. And that's what it is. And that's, that sheer act of creation for me is something that I love about being a DM is it can be intimidating to have that kind of freedom, but when you realize that it comes with certain limits and you can embrace and then kind of push those limits around, that's when DMing really opened up for me anyhow.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my advice.
You also get to play every turn.
That's
every turn.
Yeah, I think as Mike Merle said the other day, he's like, you're the rest of the world. There are 6 characters at your table, and you're every other character.
You have a limitless amount of NPCs. Right.
So my heartfelt thanks to you for coming on and sharing your knowledge. I hope you'll come back at some point.
Absolutely.
Maybe even guest in on the show. How would you like to play D&D?
I would totally love to play D&D. I hardly ever get to play D&D.
We will put you on the list. We always have people who have to drop in, and we would love to have you come and show up on stream. So we look forward to Jay making a reappearance at some point here on Saving Throw. I would dearly love to indulge in that. We don't have anything going on stream here for the rest of the week, as the whole point of the show has kind of been about our run-up to Gen Con. Everyone, except Jay and I, but the rest of the cast and crew of Saving Throw Show will be in Indianapolis starting, you can connect with them starting on Thursday at the con. So I think... What's that?
We have a show tonight.
Oh, we have a show tonight. The arrow is not on the right thing, Dom. That's what threw me. The arrow was like 8 o'clock, Iron Keep. I'm like, there's no Iron Keep. No, I'm wrong. We do have a show tonight. It's Tuesday today. Tonight at 8 o'clock Pacific, GM Tyler Rhodes, is it the season finale of our Starfinder game? So if you're curious about what's going on, if you want to see a little Starfinder in action, you can check that out tonight at 8 o'clock, featuring Nika Harper, Jesse Durant, Dan Peck, and Jordan Pridgeon in the big season finale of Starfinder. The Iron Keep Chronicles, my D&D game, is normally on Wednesday nights. We're off this week for everyone to travel to the great metropolis of Indianapolis. We will be back next Wednesday. We have 2 episodes left in this before we take our mid-season break of When a Star Falls. So we do have some more in that arc coming up, and I will be back next Tuesday with another installment of Disorganized Play, where we will talk more about what's going to happen in the Iron Keep Chronicles campaign. So in the meantime, if you are in Indianapolis, please stop, say hi. We've got a selfie challenge going on. Try and take a picture with everyone from Saving Throw Show who's at the con. There's a lot of great stuff going on. Our friends and partners campaign coins will be there. Gaming Paper often donates stuff to us and whatnot. We want to tag us. We want to see the cool stuff that you have scored at Gen Con. But we've got a huge number of events you can see. Wild Cards Live. We've got Women in Gaming seminar that we're helping facilitate. There's streaming role-playing games for fun and profit. There's no shortage of ways to come and check in with your friendly crew at Saving Throw Show. So please, 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 if you are at Gen Con, at least say, hey, hi, I'm a fan. Introduce yourself by your Twitter handle, whatever it may be. I guarantee you we're all terrible with names, but we would love to.
The Twitter handles on the other hand.
Love to meet you. Well, or your Twitch handle, whichever is more appropriate. So thank you so much. Now this is the point of the show in which we point at the camera and we say, "Let's dungeon" in unison.
Let's dungeon.
He's like, "Let's dungeon." That's the way it works. Okay, all right. So until next time, let's dungeon. See, you did it really good.
I do what I can.
Thanks,
I can
Jay.
do that. I can do R&B.
You did.
So.
Oh, well, that's your problem.